Good morning. Welcome to our headquarters here at Galloping Hill Golf Course. My name is Kevin Purcell. I'm the Executive Director of the State Golf Association, and on behalf of the Board of Trustees, we welcome you to the 2023 Golf Summit. We're going to turn it immediately over to my president to get underway here. So our president, Mike McFadden.
I'm not used to getting cheers and claps, believe me. Thanks for joining this morning. We changed the format a bit in terms of it used to be more of an afternoon and then drinks, and we thought sometimes with everybody's busy schedule, we'd start in the morning, and then this afternoon you can actually maybe even hit the links or do what you have to do. But thank you for coming. I don't know for sure. I want to say it's approximately about our 10th or maybe 12th golf summit. The Golf Summit idea was really just more of a good way to get people in the state together that are part of the game, share ideas, communicate, and there's always a current topic. I think the golf in New Jersey, I don't know if I can say this for sure, but it's probably as in a good a place as it ever has been. For us in the New Jersey State Golf Association, our tournament entries already this year, I don't want to necessarily say they're records, but they seem to be getting close to records in terms of applications. We have more tournaments, handicaps, which I've been involved with the association on and off for about 15 years. And I think after 2008, we knew there was a bit of a kind of a change in terms of a decline. And we're climbing back. There was a lot of golf courses built, and that kind of crisis created a bit of a different situation. But I think we all know there was a bit of a COVID bounce, but it appears, hopefully with COVID not ever gone, but kind of mostly behind us, that our growth and where we are is here to stay. Again, you never know the future, but we're excited. Our handicaps are up. Our foundations are doing excellent. I'm going to talk a little more, not a lot about that. And all is good. I think one of the items I wanted to mention, I think every year is a year of women's golf, but this is especially a year of women's golf in New Jersey. Our growth is phenomenal. We're very excited to host our first New Jersey State Golf Association Women's State Open this year, which will be at Montclair. Where it's going to be a great couple days. It's the same week as the PGA, early part of the week over at Baltusrol, so it's going to be a great week for women's golf in New Jersey. And again, our women's golf days, our member golf days are off the chart. We're going to try to sell a few more, open a few more this year. So things are going very well. Having said that, we always think it's great to try to get as many people in the industry together, whether it's players, whether it's people that work in the golf business, obviously from superintendents to managers of clubs. Obviously, we have a great group of head pros. We're pretty lucky to get this group together. They're going to have a forum later to talk about some current events. Our head of communications, Rebecca Gaona, will be emceeing that, thankfully not me, because she knows a lot more about the game than I do. And things are good. So that's how I wanted to open. We do have some distinguished guests here today. Executive Director of the New Jersey PGA section, who we have a great relationship, Chris Bauer, has joined us. Bill Hook, our president of the New Jersey PGA, is with us. Chris Hunt, I think I saw Chris somewhere, who runs the New Jersey Golf Foundation, has joined us. And I tell you, Chris, you're doing a tremendous job. I've been to a couple of your events, but I know the growth and what I read about what you're doing for veterans, what you're doing for the handicap. I think my hat is off to you and your whole group of colleagues. Hugh Smith, who is a Director of Regional Affairs for Youth on Course, is here. I'm not sure if I met you. Welcome, thank you. It's another area I can't say enough. We're so excited. We got involved a lot more last year with our event over at Madison. We're going to hold another one. We hit a home run, and it was all for a great cause. So for what you do for Youth on Course, thank you very much. Our New Jersey State Golf Association past presidents, a very distinguished group, Eric Houseknecht, Jeff Liebler, Frank O'Brien, Dan Meehan, Bill Freeze. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody. I see Steve Fail, by the way, he's here, who's our prior executive director prior to Kevin, so thanks, Steve, for joining. And many of our board members are here. So it's going to be a good morning. We have some great speakers. I'll probably cover more of that when they come up, but Justin Avalone from Donnelly Energies. I think we all know what's going on in the world, and I know he's presented at a few of our events, but believe me, it's very current in terms of what clubs have to deal with, or clubs and all organizations have to deal with what's going on with the energy business, electric cars, charging stations, et cetera. I've seen Justin's present a couple times, and the good news is I see him 6 months or 3 months after the prior presentation, and it's a new presentation because things are changing so fast, so stay tuned, and I think we're lucky to get Justin here. Chris Carson, golf course superintendent, which is obviously very educational and very important, so thank you, Chris, for joining. Rand Jarris, I mean, we're very lucky to have Rand here with his experience in the golf industry in global U.S. Rand is we're a coup to get Rand. And I think to get some of the PGA section panelists on their busy schedules to talk through and have a bit of a panelist discussion is going to be pretty interesting and always a lot to learn, and we're lucky to have them. Some of our sponsors, we mentioned Donnelly Industry. Justin is with Donnelly. Rod McRae, who we're lucky to have on our board and one of our officers, is McRae Capital Management, a longtime sponsor. And some of our other sponsors, New Jersey Manufacturing Provident couldn't make it today, but we want to thank them for their support, ongoing support for us. I'm certainly not using the 25 minutes Kevin gave me, so I'm going to probably jump in a little bit earlier. Administratively, I think we all saw we have breakfast, so feel free to go grab another coffee or some food. And we'll probably break approximately about 10:15, 10 o'clock for a bit of a coffee break, and then we'll get back to it. We're going to try to wrap up somewhere around noon time. So I'll try to see what I've lost, or what I forgot. Okay, New Jersey State Golf Association. I've covered a lot, and I think a lot of people in the room know a lot about what we are. 1900 was our founding. We won't discuss what our 125th anniversary is. We already covered that ad nauseum with our board. That's kind of an inside joke. But we have 125 years of history, 123 years of history. I mentioned earlier between tournaments, handicaps, our foundations, things that we don't talk as much about, our course ratings, our member golf days. I mean, we're kind of, things are going very well. This year, if you can, again, we mentioned our inaugural Women's Open at Montclair Golf Club. Our tournament schedule in terms of, I guess, what we call our majors. Our state open is at Hackensack. I'm lucky to say our state amateur is at my home course, Manasquan River. And our mid-am is at Deal Golf and Country Club. So I think our venues are pretty top-notch. They're always top-notch, and even this year they're even better. Okay. With that, I'm going to introduce Justin Avalone, Vice President of Utility Programs, Donnelly Energy. As I said in my start, I think we could probably get Justin up here once every 4 to 6 weeks, and he'll be a different kind of topic because things are rapidly changing. But I think it's always pertinent, and he does a great presentation. So I'm going to hand it off to Justin, and then Kevin can tell me what I missed, and I'll figure that out. Come up next time and add that in. Thanks, Justin.
How's everybody doing today? Thanks, Mike. So like Mike said, I've been able to have the pleasure of working with the association the last couple of years, presenting kind of the updates that we're continuously having in New Jersey in terms of energy programs and things that are going on, where clubs can take advantage of incentives that are out there, whether it be through the state or through the utilities themselves. And right now, we know it's a very big concern for clubs themselves of how can we mitigate costs, how can we keep them down, how can we see some energy savings, and things we can do to just continue to improve our club, but at as low risk for our members as possible. So, a little background on Donnelly Industries for those who don't know us. We have two big divisions for us. Our Donnelly Construction Division has been around for over 45 years. We're very familiar in the country club and golf space, done a lot of builds and renovations for you guys over the years. And then about 12 years ago, we opened up a energy division where we've been a partner with both the New Jersey Office of Clean Energy and now all of the utilities servicing their various programs throughout the state. So, some of our services include just upgrading lighting, HVAC, commercial refrigeration controls, electric vehicles, solar, and then other ways to help find you savings on your utility bill. But my goal today is to really show you guys a way to be able to make energy efficiency easy for the club. What things you can look for, find the low-hanging fruit in your club where you can make changes where either you're already looking at being able to make these or trying to set forth a plan for you for the future years and utilize some of the advantages available to you in the state right now. So the biggest source of incentives available right now is through the direct install programs throughout the various utilities in the state. So each area throughout the state now is served through its own different electric and gas utility. And each program, each utility itself has its own individual program. In this direct install program, it gives you the ability to change out old inefficient equipment to new high efficiency equipment on lighting, HVAC, and some refrigeration controls, with the utilities picking up to 70% of the cost in some cases. And one of the big changes that's happened through this direct install lately is including the increase in incentives available. They're also allowing for 0% 5-year financing on their bill or through an approved partner through these utilities. So right now you're able to go through, get lighting upgrades to LEDs, get new HVAC equipment, whether it be rooftop units, boilers, split systems, furnaces, and stuff like that, replaced with new high efficiency equipment for it, and not have to outlay any cost for it up front. It'll be spread out over 5 years at 0%, either on your bill if it's through PSE&G or through an approved vendor if it's JCP&L, O&R, or Atlantic City Electric for you there. So it's a tremendous opportunity to be able to see a reduction in your bills in terms of usage that you're going to see and lowering the electric usage for this facility, the gas usage for this facility, but not have to have a giant capital expense come out of your budget for it. And what we do as a partner in all of these programs is we come out and do a free energy assessment for you. So we'll walk the facility with you, see all the open opportunities you have, and then put together a scope of work that works best for your facility. So it's not something where you have to do an all or nothing approach where you have to do everything that's available or you can only do certain things. You're allowed to kind of mix and match these things together, and we'll work with you guys to be able to put together the best mix that's going to maximize out your incentive as best as possible. So we've had clubs in the past that have just replaced out 10 to 15 RTUs for it. We have some places that have just done small lighting projects. It all matters on what your individual facility has and what's most important to you guys at the time. But it can qualify for your clubhouse, your maintenance buildings, paddleball courts, tennis courts, stuff like that. All of these things that you have the ability to have high usage items, whether it be old metal halides, old fluorescent lighting, old units, be able to have them potentially upgraded. And we'll still steer you in the right direction for what's the best way to take advantage of these incentives there for you. As I said, each of the utilities themselves have their individual programs now too. So depending on what type of measure you would try to have upgraded, we would put you in the appropriate program for it. But Donnelly being an approved trade ally, we're approved from the top of the state down to the bottom of the state. So realistically, any utility, as long as you're not in a municipal electric thing, there'll be something available for you there to be able to take advantage of. A couple of the facts, like I said, up to 70% off in certain categories. They're actually going up to 80% for certain measures for you there too. And that's kind of where this variable comes in of just staying up to date as much as possible based off of if the utilities are behind on their goals or new initiatives that the utilities are trying to push. So one of the big things we want to make sure too that we let you know is coming out and getting this assessment for you. Us having that information, or one of the other direct install partners, allows you to be able to move quickly whenever they make these changes. So like recently, PSENG had a bonus period where they had 3 months of expanded incentives for their territories if you were in a dual fuel territory item. And we had some facilities that previously didn't want to move forward with items, but because we had all the information for them, when they had the bonus incentives available, we were able to represent them to it, show them that they could take advantage of this additional incentive, and they were able to move on it quickly. So even if it's something where you're not looking to upgrade equipment right now, it's a good way to be able to plan out for the future if you have either surprise failures of equipment or something like that happens with these ever-changing things with the utility program, to be able to take advantage of them and act on them quickly. The second thing each of the utilities are doing now are really embracing the emerging electric vehicle markets. Right now it's still fairly new in the space for everybody, but I'm sure all of you have seen tons more Teslas in the parking lots of each of your clubs now, and increasing more on each of the different car manufacturers, all increasing their brands and their EV lines that are going out there. Moving forward, we work with many of the different car brands in their dealerships, and there's certain dealers that their lines are going exclusively to electric vehicles. Most of them have a mandate to be 30, 40, 50% of their lines by 2030 to be electric vehicles. And we know this is going to be a big push in the state moving forward. Governor Murphy just recently released a ton of money to be able to be used to upgrade the electric vehicle infrastructure. And each of these manufacturers are trying to increase their line to go out there. So we know that this is something that's going to be a big push for everybody, and it's becoming more and more of not just an asset to be able to have at your club, but things that are going to be starting to be mandated based off of the amount of parking spaces you have, the usage that you have, and stuff like that. Very similar to how right now you have a parking lot. If you have 100 spaces, you have to have X amount of handicap spots. In the future, it's moving towards where you're going to have X amount of electric vehicle stations, just to be able to support all of the cars that are on the road there. So our goal right now is to be able to work with these utilities and clubs and facilities to be able to start being able to get these installed now while there's incentives available now to really help the infrastructure moving forward. Whereas in the next few years, they're going to make this a mandate and they're going to take away the incentives associated with them. So just a little background on electric vehicles, just so you guys know. There's really two types of EV chargers that generally get put in. There's a third one that's really just plugging into the wall, like a cell phone charger or something like that, but that goes at a snail's pace, so that's really only emergency status. But then you have two real ways. One is you see at office buildings and stuff like that, where you have an AC charger, can charge your car in a certain amount of time, and then you see these DC chargers that you'll see at Wawa's on the side of the highway and malls and stuff like that that do the faster charging to each of the cars. So within these three levels, the ones that the clubs would really be focusing on are these level 2 chargers. They'll charge your car up until about 80% charge, which is what the standard you really want to get your car to. It's very similar to like your cell phone where you don't want to charge it up to 100% all the time. So manufacturer's optimal charging rate is to 80%. So 0% to 80% you get at that level 2 in about 4 to 5 hours. which, as you guys know, being in club facilities is about the time that the average golfer or somebody else is going to be around there. So it winds up fitting in really well, whereas the lower cost items to be able to get installed for facilities, and then kind of fit really within the use of what golf facilities use, where somebody can go, come up early, park their car, charge, and then be able to be done with a round and have a full charge too. And then realistically, setting up with those type of chargers for the clubs, you kind of have a variety of different avenues that you can look at it for it. You can install them and be able to use them just as an asset for your club members, right? So you can just say, hey, we're going to take on this additional charge to our electric bill, but being able to have this as a service to our members. You can be able to set it up so that your members have a certain rate to it, where maybe it just covers the cost and they're getting discounted versus what they would do if they saw it something publicly. Or you can also set it up as a revenue generating option, whereas you could say, hey, if we're hosting tournaments, we're hosting outings and stuff like that, and we think we're going to have people here. If you're getting charged by your utility 10 cents a kilowatt hour, you can charge on for the charging 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And that way, at least anybody who's using your charging, you're also going to be able to pay back whatever you paid for you in these electric vehicle chargers. Now, right now, each of these, the utilities finally have theirs up and running. So, as Mike spoke, I've talked about this a couple of times now in front of the members, but we're finally at a point now where each of the electric utilities in the state are live with their incentives. And I won't get too much into what the individual utilities themselves are in terms of what's available for them, but the overall view of them is that they will pay for the infrastructure upgrade to install these chargers. So the only real outlay of cost for clubs would be the units themselves. So the hardware up front and then the software associated to use them would be a cost to the club, but most of the installation side of it can get picked up by the available utility rebates. And that includes the labor installation to it, and then also if needed, if you put in a separate meter or have a separate meter dedicated to it, the utilities will pay to upgrade your service to get these in here. Because each of these utilities all have their mandates to be able to get a certain amount of electric vehicle chargers on their network. So they're very motivated to try to get these things in at a cost-effective rate for you guys. And now the third thing that can kind of loop in with the electric vehicle charging and even the other things is utilizing solar. Right, so right now, solar is really skyrocketing in terms of the availability of things, because with the increase of electric vehicles being put on the stress on the utility infrastructure, and then just the demand for green energy, solar is a big thing now where it's finally at a cost-effective price per panel. We're getting more efficient panels every year. They're changing every 3-6 months. I'm getting sent a new panel that's being able to generate more off of less sunlight and stuff like that. And they're finally putting more money back into tax credits and the associated energy credits associated with putting on solar. Now, one of the big pushbacks on solar for golf clubs in the past have been that a large majority of the credits for them come in the form of a tax credit, right? And with the way that a lot of clubs are set up, it's very hard for them within their tax threshold to be able to take advantage of a solar system that makes sense for them and not get the ability to take advantage of that tax credit to it. So it was turning things that should be a 4 or 5 year payback into a 9, 10, 12 year payback, and it wasn't always very cost effective for clubs. But was becoming very popular for us, and we've been showing to a lot of our clubs now, is solar installation through what's called a power purchase agreement. So what this is we would line the club up with a partner to be able to install a solar system somewhere on the club's facility. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the clubhouse. It can be in an extra field that you might have somewhere. It can be on a maintenance building. It can be on a cart barn, something like that, where you don't want to take away from the aesthetic of these clubhouses that we all like to see that have either an older feel to it or a nicer aesthetic feel to it, but something that's off the path, if you will, available to it. And you can get a solar system installed in your facility be able to have no money down because somebody else will own it for you. But what they will do is lock you into a certain rate that's lower than what you get from the utility. So, for example, if right now you're paying 15 cents per kilowatt hour through the utility, which is fairly standard, you would sign up for an agreement that you're only going to pay 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So now you have a system on your roof that's generating clean energy for you. You're paying 33% less for your electric usage for it, and you're locked in to that rate against the inevitable escalating electric rates that we're all seeing right now, right? All the electric rates have been going up right now recently, and that's before this large call for all the electric vehicles and the electrification of things moving forward. So now you can lower your utility bill that much. You can market your club as being able to continue green initiatives of saying, hey, we're getting green power, being able to we're able to power our carts off of solar energy. We're taking advantage of incentives that are available out there. You're protected against those utility price increases, like I said, and you don't have to have any maintenance required with it because it's the other entity will own the system itself. So realistically, you're just leasing out available roof space or land space to another entity to be able to immediately lower costs available to you. And as we move down the road, these panels are just getting more and more efficient. So very small amounts of space can take over a very large amount of the utility bill that's currently being used for each of the facilities. So just to kind of go over our overall process with those three main fields that you can kind of see and be able to take advantage of. We'll have somebody come out, do a free energy assessment for you. So have somebody come out, walk the property for you. You can kind of be able to see everything that's you could potentially take advantage of. So they'll just look at the equipment that you have existing, take it down, and make our recommendations versus this is the best way to maximize all incentives available to you. And then if you guys have a certain scope of work, be able to kind of mold that to your guys' individual clubs of what's best for you. And all we really need for that is just access to the equipment on the club and a recent utility bill so that we can make sure that we're qualifying you towards the most advantageous program possible. From there, we'll get you the proposal and let you know what kind of energy savings you're going to be looking at, what kind of incentives you're going to be looking at. If you decided to move forward with the program, we handle everything in terms of submission to the utilities and stuff like that. So you're only having to deal with one person instead of having to deal with an electrician and HVAC contractors, talking to the utility, talking with the town and everything like that. And then you'll start seeing the savings right away from installation, obviously, from the reduction in energy use that you'll see, and you'll start seeing those payments not till after the project's complete, whether that be on your bill or with the third-party vendor associated with it. And then here are just some of the clubs that we've done recently in the last few years. These are mostly all through the direct install program. So each of these clubs have varied between, like I said, doing HVAC units. We've done boilers. We've done lighting for it. We've done court lighting. We've done parking lot lighting. It's all encompassing in there, but all of them kind of ebb and flow based off of what their individual needs for. But yeah, so here's all my contact info if you guys have any questions. I believe Mike said they're going to email everything out to everybody who attends today too. So if you have any questions additionally afterwards, just let me know, and then we'll also be outside if you have any questions. Kevin? Yeah.
Justin, not to put you on the spot, but what percentage of golf facilities in the state have the mobile charging units? Have any idea?
It's not a lot right now. That's info that we don't really have offhand, but I would say from our experience of just like all the clubs we deal with between the construction side and the energy side, I'd say under 10% of them right now.
And I was just wondering if in a comparison to other recreational facilities, it just seems to me like I see them a lot more often at places where people go, obviously stadiums and such like that.
Yep.
It seems like we're kind of behind the curve here. To me, it's like those kiosks that were at the malls that
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it's definitely a need for it, and for the space where golf clubs and EV kind of match up very well, just because of the length of time that you're there, right? Most of the facilities that we would say that come to us and ask for it, that we would say, hey, maybe this doesn't make sense for you, are people who are in and out transactions, right? Like we work a ton with Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's and stuff like that, where they're like, hey, I want to put these in, and we're happy to do it and take advantage of it. But when we show them, if they're looking at it from a money-making perspective, we say, hey, this might not make sense for you because somebody's not going to come and sit here for 4 hours and stuff like that, unless they really enjoy Dunkin' or McDonald's, which that's their own prerogative. These are really made for places where you're going to be for a substantial amount of time. We have them at our own office because of that. We have a bunch of people that work within the business that have Teslas, and that's where I charge, because that's where I spend the most of all my time outside of work. And we've done a lot of this with office spaces and stuff like that, of people who are going to be there for a long amount of time. So with the fact that almost all of membership is going there to either play golf, which is an extended 4-hour plus time amount, or even just grab a bite to eat, right? That's still an hour or two that you can still get a significant amount. That I know, as somebody who has an EV car, having that advantage that if I can just get an extra hour to charge while I'm somewhere, as opposed to having to worry about, now I have to go drive somewhere else, and now I have to hope that there's a Wawa nearby, or there's somewhere else, or I have to go 5 miles out of my way this way to do that. If I could just do it at these places that I go all of the time and I want to frequent, it would definitely be a huge asset to my life. And I think that's, in the conversations that I've had with a lot of the other managers, that's something that's starting to come around, of realizing, hey, this is something that's inevitable. We can have this as a service to, hey, it looks good to future membership. It's a fairly cheap add-on for existing membership, and it also gets you ahead of the curve just in terms of where we're inevitably going to be in the next few years.
Just one more.
Yeah.
With regard to the technology, if the clubs go out and they spend some money on installing this, obviously there are programs that help with that. Is there any concern with that the technology might change and they'll have to upgrade, soon or later? I mean, we're at the infancy stage, and
Yep.
is there a chance that happens, or not a chance, but is it?
Yeah. I mean, it will inevitably happen, right? I wouldn't sugarcoat that to it. That's why part of what we've also been setting a lot of places up for is kind of the ability to be able to dip your toe in while there's incentives, and setting you up for the future to also be able to expand on it, so that you're not caught too much in that. So with the labor side being the portion that's really picked up on the EV side, is it doesn't just multiply if you do one charger versus 2 chargers, right? If it was $5,000 to install one, it's not $10,000 to install 2. It might be $7,000, because we're already digging up some of what we need to. We're already working with the utility. We already have people on site. It's just a matter of running a little bit extra to it, right? So a lot of the plans that we've put up for some of these facilities that say, hey, I know I want to do this. I know I want to take advantage of it. I just don't know what my time frame is. I don't know how much business I can get through this, or how much traffic we're going to have through these, is saying, we'll start off, put in maybe 2 chargers or 4 chargers, right? And you can get 4 incentives for that, because that still maximizes out to it. So for PSE&G example, you can get $7,500 a level 2 charger that you have open to it. So that's $30,000 that you could have there. Whereas to install those 4, maybe one would cost, like I said, $5,000, or one would cost $5,000. 4 would only cost 10 or 12. So now you have this wiggle room in there to get all of that covered, so that if you also want to set up where, hey, we're going to set up 4 right now to be live, we'll run the power for you to have 4 additionally and just cap them off. And that way you don't have to outlay the cost right now to do 8, but you were able to get the ability to have 8 run, that later on in the future, all you're going to have to do is pay for the hardware and the small amount of wiring it together, as opposed to having the whole thing. And I think that's where we just want to be able to have that conversation with you guys in terms of what's your plan currently, what's your plan looking like in the future, and how you want to take advantage of it. Because there's definitely a now aspect to it, but there's a very large where you want to be in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years type of thing, and making sure that we can take advantage of the incentives that are available now that may not be here when you want to do that 5 years from now. Yeah.
Jump into the solar program. A pushback I often get from boards and LRP committees is the visual aesthetics.
Yep.
Nobody wants to see the big solar panels. How far advanced are the roof shingle solar programs that are being touted?
Yeah, so there's really two real ones on. You have the ones that are like the standard panels that most people don't like. You have some of these now, like the Tesla panels that some are seeing and stuff like that, where honestly you couldn't tell the difference between that roof and another very nice roof. The one thing is that it can be anywhere between 5 to 10 times the cost. So right now where that technology is at in terms of the aesthetic of the solar panels, it's still very much becomes a vanity thing, if you will. Whereas like if you're willing to pay that extra cost for it, you can reshingle everything and it's very efficient, and they're also supposed to be forever roofs. So there's like an additional add-on to that where, hey, you're not gonna have to change out the roof in 30 years. It's supposed to be able to last past there. I would say that technology still isn't very cost effective for clubs right now, especially not having the tax credit associated with it. So if they did this PPA format, you could maybe do it, but it would also be very hard to get that format because of what the outlay of cost would be. You probably wouldn't really save on what it would be. You'd actually probably wind up paying more short-term for electric, but you'd have this new roof and panels associated with it. But that is why I kind of led into some of it is what we're doing now is finding these areas that are off that most clubs inevitably do have, which is a maintenance facility that's in the woods somewhere, a cart barn, something like that, and being able to put them on there where people kind of don't expect that to have the same ambiance that a clubhouse has, but you can at least take advantage of it there, of the useful space that you have now. And then as the technology evolves, if you needed to add on, you can either look at it as a separate system or add on to the existing system that you have there.
I'll get back to the EV stations. I kind of did my research, and I was told that in order to qualify for any incentives from the government, we have to open it up to the public.
So that's true. Now the one thing is with the level 2 chargers though, they're not ones that people are gonna really come off the road to charge. And that's been my big conversation with people. Now if you wind up having gates or something at your facility, PSE&G is not gonna approve them at that. There are some grants that are available for it, and also depending on the utility that you're in, some of them have what they call workplace as opposed to open. So like PSE&G wants everything to be open available to it. JCP&L has a limited amount of workplace ones as well as the commercial ones. So Springbrook's and JCP&L, that one could technically qualify for the workplace one. There's just a limited amount of the ones that could. So the workplace ones don't have to be open to the public. But those are the ones that will all vary based off of the individual utility that you're in. But realistically, level 2 charge, because it's 4 hours, the only way you'd really have somebody coming in to charge that is if somebody just like dozed off, wasn't paying attention to what they had, and they were so far away from a fast charger that you happened to be the closest level 2, then they'd probably be on it for whatever time it was to get them to that fast charger. Because otherwise they'd be sitting there for a while to do it. But we know that is concern for some clubs where they don't want people coming off. But unless you're very close to a main road or something like that, it's very likely that there's either a fast charger or another level 2 that is closer that they would use for it that way. Yeah.
Are you aware whether any clubs pass on the charge, the costs to the people that use it, or is it absorbed by the clubs?
Right now, it's really all the club's choice to it individually. Do it we haven't had any within the clubs yet, but most of the office spaces that we've worked with that are doing it, what they're doing is people who are workers at that facility, they're charging them a certain rate, and then you can also have a separate rate for people who are not members there. And that's what I would think would probably be the best setup so that it's not a full cost to the club, is saying, hey, you can charge here for either cheap or to at least cover the costs for the club to it, so it's not an additional expense that they're incurring month over month, but it would still be discounted versus what they would see in the public. So the members would be motivated to use it there as opposed to maybe like their house or something else if they didn't have it at the house, or go into one of those public ones. But you're not having to necessarily make a profit off your own members. But you can make a profit when it comes to having outings or members' guests or something like that to it. Okay. Anything else? All right, well, as always, I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's always good to have a subject matter expert on your topic, and I think we clearly have the subject matter expert with Justin. I think the question regarding cell phones was pretty pertinent, 30 years ago or whatever time frame. Who would have thought? So I think it's a great topic and a lot more to come. So I do want to. I have a tendency to go out of turn, and I think I did miss when I was going through the past presidents, Jeff Liebler. So I wanted to. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to introduce our next presenter. Chris Carson was a superintendent for 36 years at Echo Lake. My 2 years of greenskeeping at Essex Fellows in the 1970s probably won't qualify me to speak to Chris at all, technically. That was a long time ago. But for us to get Chris is tremendous. He retired from his role as superintendent at Echo Lake recently. He served as the president of the Golf Course Superintendents of New Jersey, the New Jersey Turfgrass Association, and the Tri-State Turf Research Foundation. He's been teaching at Rutgers in their professional golf turf management program since 2000. He's going to go through the risks and challenges, and this is another pretty pertinent subject. And I mentioned subject matter expert. We clearly have Chris as a subject matter expert. So.
Thank you. Good morning. Superintendent Emeritus is now my official title, so I've got Latin after my name, which is great. I've got something to put on my gravestone. This is not going to be a overly technical talk, though I found that quite fascinating. Thank you for that. You can see a time, hey Maureen, you can see a time where this is going to become inevitable at all clubs. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about what a golf course superintendent thinks and how we act, and quite honestly, it's a lot different than you folks. So let's start with 12 things that your club should know about its superintendent. Your course does not achieve its conditioning through elves or magic. It's all about hardworking and usually invisible people. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of golf course crew working, and if you'll notice throughout every one of these pictures, you won't see a single golfer in any of these pictures. And I just want you to be aware of that as we go through this brief presentation this morning. This is the 16th hole at Echo Lake Country Club, and we're ahead of play, and we're taking care of some bunkers. It's not an invisible force. So therefore, it's the superintendent's job to give life to our crew, to let the members, let the club officials know the value and the import and the reason why we invest so much money in maintaining a golf course. I'd like you to think for just a second about some of the people that you are familiar with. If you work at a club where there are caddies, for example, you will see that there are golfers and caddies here. And for 4 or 4.5 hours or 6 hours, depending on the round of play at your club, there's a relationship between those two people, the club member, the golfer, and the caddy. And quite often there is a very real relationship that develops over time to the point where when it comes time to contribute to some of your worthy causes, your caddy scholarship fund, for example, there's a great willingness to do so. It's certainly the case with my club, where contributing to that cause and helping people on down the road is a very meaningful and feel-good type of thing. So there's a relationship there. There's also a relationship in the clubhouse where the club member is interacting with the person that served the food, perhaps even cooked their food, the bartenders. There's a relationship there. But that relationship doesn't really exist, if you think about it, with the staff that maintain the golf course. So whereas, and this is where now superintendent frustration here. I mean, I'm retired, so what are they going to do, fire me? So I'll just tell you, one of the frustrations I've had is to try to get across the value of a crew member working out there in these hazards, in these bunkers, 96 degrees and humid for 8 hours, and trying to get them from $13 an hour to $13.50 an hour, and having a club think, well, that's extravagant, we don't need to do that. Meanwhile, how much are you paying that caddy? $100 a bag, they're making $200 in cash, which is the equivalent of how much hour? And honestly, that's because there's a relationship there. So one of the things I want to try to get across to officials such as yourself and club members such as yourself is that these people are very real. And again, you'll see no club members involved here. This is all work at my club. But on the right is the last green of a 14-hour day of pushing sand and picking up sand and aerifying greens. And this is not easy work. This is very difficult work, and it's hard work. But it's work that we do willingly because we love this job. You mentioned 2 years experience at Essex Fells Country Club, is that right? So I started as my next door neighbor was a golf course superintendent at Montclair Golf Club. His name was Ed Nicholson, and I started riding my bike to Essex County Country Club, my first job with Essex County. And I fell in love with the business doing this for $2.90 an hour, cutting greens. And an 18-year-old person makes a decision, and here it is 46 years later, and I'm superintendent emeritus. But I still love the business. I was very fortunate to work for 36 years at this club. It's a great club. It's right down the road, Echo Lake Country Club, and quite proud of having made it. So these people exist, but do they? So one of the laments you'll probably hear if you're all club officials is where's the labor? It's a common problem in not just with golf course superintendents, but with running a clubhouse and running a pro shop, and where's all the labor? And just briefly, I'll just say that traditionally there would be the unemployed, and we do get some from that pool, though that pool is being pulled at from a lot of different directions. And I will say that it has become harder and harder to find a good pool of decent unemployed candidates for running a golf course. So we have to think outside the box a little bit, and we can look for the underemployed. And the underemployed might be, well, an example is I've been teaching at Rutgers for 22 years now, and I've taught over 1,500 students who have gone on to become golf course professionals. And it was a real good, feel-good story just last fall where a student was picking up carts from the parking lot of a Costco, and the superintendent saw him out there. You like working outside? And he said, yeah, I do. And he says, why don't you come work for me on the golf course? And this person said, okay, I'll try that. And he tried it, and now he was put through school, and now he's entering the ranks as an assistant golf course superintendent, making $65,000 a year because he was identified and picked out of the that labor pool and given a chance to grow. So the underemployed is a possibility for us as superintendents. There are time shifters, and one of the real problems we have today, for example, would be working mothers who want to work but can't because they've got to get the kids off to school. So opportunities exist for time shifters who can come in not at 5 o'clock or 4:30 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning where we usually start so that we can stay out of your way, but maybe at 8:30 in the morning, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and work for 4-hour shifts, maybe taking care of the surrounds of the clubhouse or divoting fairways or something of that nature. So time shifters are a real possibility that some superintendents are working with. And the currently employed, what can we do to attract people from your job at Walmart, your job as a landscaper, your job somewhere else, and be attracted to our business? And I'm going to talk a little bit today, just briefly, about some of the ways I think that we can do that we can attract people to the wonderful world of golf course maintenance. But the currently employed also includes the people that are currently on your staff. What you don't want, what we don't want as superintendents, is anybody coming and poaching our people. So one of the things that is very useful is for the superintendent, the manager of all of your departments, to have stay interviews, is a term that's used. But basically sit down and have a conversation with the current employees, the people that are already with you, have a training, have been there for 3, 4, 5 years, and say, why do you like working here? What can we do to retain you? How can we make you happier? And from those interviews, use that as an opportunity to grow the rest of our staff. Just parenthetically, I'll add that when I ask the students at Rutgers how long it takes to bring somebody on board in the golf course world, in my world, how long does it take to train somebody up to speed? The short answer is it's 2 to 3 years before I think those people are fully inculcated into the methods and reasons why we do things on a golf course. So retaining current employees is a big thing. And that's been experienced by all of us with the COVID boom of golf, by the lack of labor, and by the corresponding increase in salary that's come along and long overdue, in my opinion. So paying your people the amount of money and then giving them opportunities to grow is a great way for keeping labor and keeping them happy. Just briefly, this is I run a conference in Atlantic City every year, a big conference, and this is a group of high schoolers who are in Monmouth County who are taught by a former Rutgers grad in a vocational school, and they are interested in this business as 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and wouldn't it be great to get people like this onto your staff and expand those kinds of internships and roles, all bright-eyed, all bushy-tailed, and basically that was me 46 years ago. I was interested in the business and I did something about it. So it takes time to develop seasoned employees. They just cannot be brought in from central casting, give me 4 of X and 3 of Y. It doesn't work that way. They have to be developed, they have to be encouraged with appropriate pay, growth, and opportunity. And opportunity is what I want to talk a little bit about today. This is a sign. I was touring Central Park with a friend of mine, Zach, who is in charge of all turf grass in Central Park, and this banner was there, and I stopped, and he says, "What are you looking at?" I took a picture of this sign. My daughter says, "My father takes care of the best park in the world." And Zach said, "Oh yeah, that's Maurizio." So think about the kind of sense of ownership that this crew member at Central Park is expressing when he says that I'm taking care of the best park in the world. And quite frankly, he is. But this is the kind of ownership that we can put into the minds of our staff members. We try to, superintendents try to, so that there's a real sense of pride, of a response to not just doing the job, but understanding the reasons why we do the job and making the surfaces better for our members. And when we can get that ownership, we're going a long way towards success. So following up on that, we're all the assistants. I tell the students at Rutgers, so this year there was about 160 students, first and second years, fall and winter total. And it used to be that they would go out and they would scramble for jobs. Well, right now there are probably something in the order of 400 or 500 assistant superintendent's jobs available throughout the country, good jobs. And basically every one of these students at Rutgers, all 160 of them, are already employed. So they're not graduating and looking for work, they're graduating with work. And what we have to do if you're in the situation of needing a superintendent is try to find a way to attract them. And there are ways to do that, but you're not going to get them coming out of school looking for a job. They have jobs. But what you maybe want to do is develop your own pipeline, and this is actually happening right now. It's very interesting to see. And the starting point at Rutgers is this program. So Rutgers has a 3-week preparatory course. It's now online. The last couple of years, and they're going to keep it online, make it more accessible, worldwide accessible. So for $2,000, superintendents can find and identify 1 or 2 of the key people in their staff who are Tiggers, who have got some real energy, who want to grow, who want to advance, and maybe you put them into this on an online program in January, $2,000, no cost for transportation, just go through this. There's no grades or anything on it. It's an introduction to the world of turf management, and I love teaching in this class. I really do. I really truly enjoy this because this is the groups. There were 58 people in there this past January. But each one of those people, for the most part, are stepping out for the first time out of the primordial soup and into the world of management and into the world of discovering the why behind the reasons that we do things. I'll just quickly add, by the way, that when I was a superintendent, I retired just recently, but I had a Twitter account that grew in some popularity, but I took a picture of a student in this class when it was in person, actually. And I said, you know, that the picture was him in the class, and it was found unicorn. This was an incoming green chairman at a country club in South Jersey who wanted to learn about the business so that he could be a better boss, and he went to this program. And I thought that was fantastic.
Is that a multi-label program?
It is not, no. We've tried this, and it's been difficult. But it's interesting you say that, because what I have discovered is more and more the Hispanic community and underserved communities are rising through this program, and it's very encouraging to see. Whereas finding someone with an Hispanic background would be a rarity 10 years ago, I probably had 5 or 6 or 7 this winter. The graduation ceremony was Friday, just a couple days ago, Hispanic. And there's a real sense of loyalty when people are given this opportunity to grow. We have tried multilingual things, and we do some for some of the registration requirements for, it's called ProFact, for putting fertilizers down, but it's actually difficult to get into that community. We've had a hard time. We've tried. I just want you all to know, number 2, that our most important job is to safeguard the safety and welfare of our staff first and our members. That's what we do. The most important thing that we do as superintendents is ensure your safety. So when we take a look around every year with our tree company, and we're looking at trees, we're not looking, a lot of them are weeds, yes, but the ones that are safety problems, the ones that are hanging over with dead branches or possible liabilities, those are the things that we really look at. And I won't get into it too much, but that is our number 1 responsibility. Number 3, we must follow important rules to ensure that our clubs comply with state and local regulations. And this might surprise you, but there's a lot of regulations in our business and requirements in our business that golf course superintendents are aware of, and with potentially heavy fines, some of them quite substantial. If we blow through water use problems, if we use too much water, for example, your fines could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is not a small problem. We have to be very careful of how we follow the rules. So an example of some of the rules we must follow, there has to be, and usually it's a superintendent, and for me, with the superintendent and my assistants, have to be fully regulated as pesticide applicators. This requires education, recertification, testing, if you will, yearly payments, those kinds of things. So that's a requirement, a licensing problem that we have to take care of. The New Jersey DEP has got a water use permit that you have to have. You have to pay the state to take water out of the ground if you're using a well like I did. It's not a great deal of money. I think my fee was $4,800 a year. And I have students that pay $1 million a year for water. People from Las Vegas, $1 million a year for water is a lot of money. But for me, it's $4,800 plus the electricity to pump that water out of the ground. But it also requires very careful record keeping, quarterly reporting, periodic inspections, and you have to make sure you're on top of this. Because if you blow through your monthly allotments, we're allowed only so many, there's a budget. You only so many gallons per month, so many gallons per year, and if you blow through either one of those numbers, you're really exposing your club to a lot of fines. Yeah?
Chris mentioned that permit required extraction. Is the shortage issue of water still ongoing?
Shortage of water?
Yeah.
It's periodic. One of the things that we have to do every 5 years is a water restriction plan, if you will. And what that means, it used to be, so now it's associations at work and people like the State Golf Association advocating for us. The last time we had a drought, I think it was 1999, and arbitrarily the state said that we're going to cut water by 90%. And it wasn't stepped down, it was 90%, and that was outrageous. They didn't cut the beer industry at all, by the way. They use a lot of water, but they cut us by 90% because, we're not as important as beer, apparently. But now there's rules in place where there are step downs. So we have to say, well, okay, the first thing we'll do is we'll turn off our driving range and our rough. And then it's going to be maybe just landing areas we're going to water and sacrifice some other areas. In other words, step down restrictions. But at the moment, there's no water restrictions or water problems in New Jersey. We have, if you've got public water or public water as a backup, there are cross connections that connect those two water systems, and they're a pain. They have to be inspected 3 times a year. There are certifications, there are costs in that, and that means every time that happens, that's like a 4-hour ordeal, and if there's even a drop of water that's leaking between these systems, it's kind of a pain. Our storage of chemicals, as you might expect, and I certainly hope you'll agree that storage of chemicals is a big deal and appropriate, but they require detailed record keeping. They require an appropriate storage facility. So, for example, it must be self-contained, it must be locked, it must have explosion-proof lighting, it must have ventilation, there must be metal shelves, there must be containment on it in case of leaks. There are requirements that has to be fulfilled, and we have to be on top of that. Every time we spray, we've got to notify our members with posting on the 1st and 10th tee. We've got to make paper records. Every year, we've got to make annual records to the state. We have to keep track of these things. There are also limitations on how much of certain chemicals that we can use in the course of a year, and we have to be aware of those regulations and pay attention to them. If you're using a product like chlorothalonil, there's only so many times you can spray your fairways on that. And you have to be ready for inspections. Fuel storage is a big deal. Maybe some of you in the clubhouse world have understood this when you've removed underground storage tanks or have got maybe an overzealous inspector involved, and I've experienced both of those things. But maintenance, inspection, reporting, and testing of our fuel storage is a big thing, and that requires very careful record keeping. We have to make sure that we are training our staff for safety, complying with insurance regulations and OSHA regulations, and just basically safety regulations. These are things that we have to pay attention to. We also, by law now, have got to be certified in something called ProFact, which is application of fertilizers. Fertilizers are regulated as to what we can use and where we can use them and when we can use them. You can't use after a certain date. You can't use a whole lot of phosphorus in the fertilizer because this leads to algae blooms. There are all kinds of reasons why these fertilizer rules make sense. But the main reason this state law exists was because our friends at Rutgers realized that what was happening was local townships were having their own individual regulations, and they were different. And that was a real pain because it wasn't science-based, it was emotion-based, and we never want that. We want to get the scientists involved, and Rutgers got involved and helped develop this program. But it's a regulation that we've got to be certified for and recertified for. And no regulations on this other than requires common sense, local noise regulations. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced the visits from our local police force when somebody complains, but if you've got one angry neighbor, your life can become hell. So it requires common sense. And every once in a while, we start early. We start, 5 in the morning. And one of our guys forgets because for them it's midday. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's let's go. It's almost lunchtime, and they crank up a backpack blower, and they're screaming in the bunker, and neighbors are still sleeping on a Sunday morning. You can understand why that's a problem. So these are things that we pay attention to. Here's just a couple of pictures of a conference that I help run in East Atlantic City. Maureen, the Superintendent's Association Executive Director is here. They're part of this. But there's a lot of education, ongoing education, that your golf course superintendent and assistants pay attention to. There's learning, there's certification, there's storytelling, and there's also a camaraderie thing that goes on as well in this and other events that the superintendents and other associations put together. Your superintendent often, quite frequently, has a long-term outlook when our golfers have a short-term outlook. And just to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, this is my club. So this is a fairway, intermediate rough, and rough. And you can see this area over here that's really in distress. And, so I'm going to ask this crowd, what do you think that is? Anybody? Cart traffic?
It's car traffic or it's drought.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Wrong on both accounts. Thanks for playing. This fairway, and this is sprayed for disease, fungus. And you can see that we spray the intermediate rough, and right here, can you see this line very clearly? This is where the sprayer overlapped. This is disease. This is summer patch disease, Magnaporthiosis poe would be the Latin. No, Latin, sorry. But the thing about this is, it's you can't treat it. You've got to prevent it. So this is a picture when I put my new irrigation system in, and I all of a sudden went from single row irrigation to to irrigation that goes out, and the expectations of this is where there's a problem. I'm bearing my soul here because why not? My members thought that rough was going to be radically improved because we now had water on it. But in fact, that wasn't the case, and the reason was because we never really took care of our rough because every year it went dormant. So all of this rough was kind of garbage. And those first couple of years were tough because they were very susceptible to disease. To treat summer patch requires chemistry and appropriately timed chemical applications. So out of that came, well, what's this all about? And I explained what it was. And they said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I can develop a plan. How much is that going to cost? I said, well, I don't know, $30,000. And their answer was, well, we'll give you $5,000. Do the best you can. Because, country clubs. And so what I did is I got some cheap chemicals called tebuconazole, and they're not spraying. You'll see, I'm just very clear about this. Safety is our number one requirement. You'll see there's no chemical coming out of that. I would never have two sprayers lined up behind this stuff because you never drive through chemical spray. Yes, sir.
So, Chris, relative to costs as well, are more portions going to not putting the underground sprinklers in the rough, or is that what's not going to go in your dirt?
No, I think I think as people get modern, our irrigation system was 1966, and it was center row, had been expanded over the years, and then we went with the 5-row system, which really allows us to dial in and have individual head control. It actually made us more efficient, but and while we broadened the amount of turf that we water, what is happening though is a lot of clubs are going away from some of their out-of-play areas. They're growing into low maintenance areas. Can you picture what I'm talking about? But the problem with low maintenance areas is there are a lot more maintenance than rough. So just so you know, all those low maintenance areas, people really want are amber waves of grain, and that requires a lot of maintenance, a lot more money, but less water. So I could go on for hours, but I'm not going to. Anyway, so they're lined up just to show you that what I did with my $5,000 is I made 2 applications of very cheap chemical, made 2 spins around the fairways. Can you see the line? So it's not perfect, and this is area I just overseeded. So I lined this up for this picture. So what really has to happen was I and superintendents started pounding seed into the ground and improving the quality of our turf in the rough by adding seed, improved species of grass in the rough, and that's really the solution because improved species of grass will resist this disease. And when I left, we didn't. Did I get credit by here? Country club stuff. This is the second year after that we had another outbreak of this disease. Do you think I got credit for preserving this turf, or did I get blamed for? It's why didn't you spray that? I said, well, you gave me $5,000. You said do the best you can. I said, well, I did the best I can. When I left, we were spraying all 65 acres of rough 3 times a year, and I think my successor is going 4 times a year. I never in a million years thought I'd be spraying rough, but I wanted to keep my job. What's happened is expectations of the membership have changed. So again, I'm talking about long-term issues. We did a big master plan at my club. It's ongoing. This is our 17th green. This is my shop right here. Here's my office right there. So just at the last minute, this green was a strip and flip. We took the sod off. This is sod that was grown in this pocketed area. If you know, the 17th green of Echo Lake Country Club is deeply pocketed. And the sod was taken off. The green was rebuilt. This sod was put back on. And the reason is because that sod that was there was a bent and poa. Poania is, technically it's a weed, but it's something that all of us, that I embrace. It's an excellent surface. It does well in shade. Bentgrass does poorly in shade. And at the last minute, architects get involved, and, as they do, wave their hand and spend money. That's what they do. They wave their hands and money is spent. And on the back of this green, an extension was put in, a roll-off, but we didn't have any more bent poa sod, so we put bentgrass sod in here. So here it is, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you can see that there's shade on that bentgrass. And immediately my mind is going, okay, that's a problem, because that grass is going to fail. It's just not going to survive. It's not going to thrive in a shady environment. So what's the solution? We'd gotten to the point where cutting down trees was no longer a big political problem. I took down over 3,000. So this next picture is taken from right there, looking this way, and there is the the weeds removed, and sunlight on the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so superintendents think in terms of quality of turf, we think in terms of safety, and when it comes to things like trees, we're very keyed into, if you plant a tree here, what that's going to be in 60 years. That's the way superintendents think. A metaphor would be learning how to cut green. So the first time, anybody here cut a green? Did you cut a green? Have you? So the first time you learn how to cut a green, you're looking down at the machine, and what's happening is you're making these jerky little reactions to correct yourself, and you end up with these squiggle, these, or as my guys say, anaconda, no anaconda. But then as you get involved in it, you learn how to look ahead. You look ahead, not at the machine. And you're allowed to make these subtle adjustments so that you can make these lasers and straight lines. And it's a thing you learn to love. It's how I fell in love with the business. But learning how to cut putting greens requires, you have to look ahead, and you've got a plan. And that's what superintendents do all the time. We look ahead. One of the things that superintendents wish their members understood, especially in this time of boom like we're in right now, is that often money won't solve the problem, time will. So if I have a green that's in distress, as can happen, and it's August 1st, and it's sick, it's not happy, and what do I do about that? Well, often the thing to do about that is nothing. Because if I go in there and try to cultivate it or pound seed into it or do something to it, I'm gonna make it worse. Because now's not the time. But if I wait 3 or 4 weeks or just after Labor Day and then get into it where the temperatures are cooling and the light is different, I've got a chance now to make an appreciable difference. So it may look like I'm ignoring that problem when in fact, what I'm doing is the right thing. So sometimes the hardest thing a superintendent has to do is nothing. And the question is that procrastination or is that patience? And it's very difficult sometimes to explain the patience involved in just waiting for the right time to do the right job. It can be a real challenge for superintendents to communicate that need. So I encourage you, if you've ever got that particular issue with your superintendent, that you remember that point. The other thing that happens is, when it comes to long range, is we know what can happen. We just know because we've done it. So this is a case of cart traffic on top of wilted turf. Now that damage is going to take, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to recover. So there are times when we're going to say no carts in the fairway because we're in a drought. Or we're going to say no carts today because of rain. Or we're going to say, you know what, now's not the time to double cut and roll the greens, even though you want them for your outing, because we're in a very stressful period right now. What we need to do is back off a little bit. We need to maybe raise the height of our greens a little bit or not do as much intense cultivation. Maybe let the greens get a little bit slower for a couple weeks. Let's get through this period of difficult time. Superintendents, think ahead, because we know I can give you good conditions today, but there might be a very bad payoff 2 or 3 weeks down the road. Why? Because we've done it. So when the signal light turns yellow, we have to pay attention to those signals. Similarly, from a planning perspective, strategic planning is a big thing. I'm sure the State Golf Association plans strategically, and superintendents will plan strategically as well. Just like any business, if you think about, the difference between American businesses and maybe European businesses, a lot of the short-term nonsense, the quarterly returns, that drives a lot of the Wall Street is nonsense. What you're doing is you're playing these games to make a quarterly number instead of paying attention to the longer picture. So strategic planning, in my opinion, is a way for clubs to really make sure that we smooth out those ups and downs and make sure that we've got goals and planning so we have a smooth ride ahead. This is my budget, an old one, but every year in my budget I would put the goals for the current year, how we did against those goals, and outline goals for the next year. Sort of my State of the Union address, I put that in front of every budget. And sort of my way of putting a strategic planning process in place with conversation with our members so that we've got direction and we all sort of know which way we're going. That's especially helpful if there's turnover on the board and you've got people that want this and there's people that want that. And real strategic planning involves when you get a master plan work. Echo Lake's gone through major master plan work. And it's ongoing. There's a lot of changes up there. If you're playing at Echo Lake this year, by the way, no, it's really quite fascinating. There's a lot of changes on 10, 11, and 12 that are going to be quite interesting for you. Number 5, we don't aerify greens just to mess with your heads, even though you think we do. We're doing it to make our playing surfaces better. See, the thing about this is golfers generally pay attention to the surface, the playing surface, the firmness of it, how the ball rolls, where superintendents obsess about what's under the surface. We look at those greens differently than you do. It's all about roots. It's all about getting through the summer. It's all about being able to take nutrition and moisture and get it up through that surface and doing it in a way that provides you with a great playing surface. So our job is to look under the soil, and your job as golfers to look at the surface. And that's one of the reasons why, as an instructor at Rutgers, I always tell our students, you have to play the game. Because when you play the game, you're looking at the golf course differently than if you're managing the turf. In fact, I think, I'm as guilty as this as anybody. I played the game too, but I think your superintendent should be required to play the golf course once a week. I think that should be a requirement. And maybe it's not even 18 holes, but it should be required. Why? Because you see things differently when you play. It's as simple as that. So number 6, good relationships mean good business. What do I mean by that? Every once in a while we'll get a board member that starts, well, we need to get 3 quotes for everything every time that we're doing a 600 square foot asphalt patch and bring in those 3 quotes. And the problem with that is A, it's time consuming, B, it's not really effective, and C, what you do is you quickly run out of people who are going to kind of come and give you a quote on those things. What superintendents want to do is to establish good relationships with their vendors and their suppliers so that when Hurricane Sandy comes, like it did at Echo Lake Country Club, this is 1/3 of a 3-legged, 96-foot tall red oak tree that dropped onto that green. And we had a good relationship with our tree company. They were there the next day, helping us with this and 98 other trees of similar size that went down in Hurricane Sandy. Why? Because we had a good ongoing relationship with a tree company, and we were first on their list, not last on their list, or one of the first on their list. This is quite a challenge, by the way. This is the 18th green. That's Echo Lake. There were stubs in that ground that were 6 feet deep that came down on that. We also had our facilities manager, Wayne Frew. He had a situation where there was a wedding party and an HVAC failure, and it was Saturday afternoon, and he got his guy, because he had a good relationship, to come at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and save the day. And just imagine what it's like to have your ballroom and no air conditioning on a hot, humid day, and there's a bridal party there. So those relationships really do pay off down the road. And when you, as a board member, ask for quotes, the quoting process, yes, keep your suppliers honest, of course. But understand that the value of relationships can be monumental. So in the case of here, if there's a disease outbreak that's something different and I need chemicals in a hurry, I've got certain people I know that I can call at 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and I can have chemicals at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning if that need is really urgent. And that's relationship and a relationship building. So the value of relationships is quite vital, in my opinion. Number 7, the Rutgers Center for Turfgrass Science is the largest turfgrass research team in the world, and also the best. This is the Rutgers Field Day. I'm quite happy to be heavily involved in Rutgers. I just don't teach there. I'm on their finance committee for the turf program, and I'm president of their advisory council and a lot of other things, because they do so much for us. Their farm has saved, I tried to work out the number. It's not many millions of dollars. It's hundreds of millions of dollars for clubs in New Jersey in the last 36 years. Since I've been there, I'm working out if it's $10,000 a club saved just because of the research they've given to every club. There's how many clubs? 260, something like that? Call it round it to $3 million, and it could very well be much more than that times 36 years. This is a lot of money that Rutgers University has saved each and every one of you, because they'll tell you which chemical to use and which chemicals don't work, which turfgrass species to use. And I don't have time to tell you about Rutgers University, other than they're the finest in the world, and they're right in our backyard. This is Hort Farm 2, where a lot of their research happens. The thing, though, is the superintendent is not the end user of their research. One of the frustrations superintendents have is to get golfers, you, the people in this room, to realize that you are the end users of this research. We use their knowledge to give you a playing surface, but the true end users of the research at Rutgers University is the golfer. And somewhere along the line, one of my missions, Kevin, as you know, is to try to make you more aware of the work that goes on at Rutgers. And in fact, in June, I'm going to be sending something through your newsletter about an initiative that we're putting together that tells a little bit of that story, and a couple of the people down there. But if there's a take-home message I'd like you to remember is that Rutgers is the best in the world, and you are benefiting from it, and not just on the golf course. If you're walking on a cool season turf grass, chances are about 95%. Any cool season turf grass in America, the chances are about 95% that Rutgers University developed that grass. I mean, it's monumental the impact that Rutgers has had on turf world. And it's not just you as the golfer, but also the whole events. We had a good year that year. We had the state amateur in 18, sounds about right. And then we had the polo 2 weeks later. That's Akshay Bhatia and Rachel Heck, so two phenomenal golfers. What a great joy that was to have those 3 weeks. It's also tournament golf and tournament preparation. So there's more to it than that in the State Golf Association's mission to put on events such as this. Number 8, we deal with many variables that are capricious, and the most important is weather. I know you sort of think you get it. I know you do. But you really sort of don't, unless you're a farmer. Farmers really get it. You know, I used to, but you know, it's like my wife says, you know, I'm driving down the road, you know, you got the weather on the 1s, weather's on the 8s, weather's on the 3s, and here we go, I'm pushing buttons like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm trying to get a good forecast here. I'm trying to get, would you turn that off? And my answer, let's go once more around the horn. And I'm retired now, and I honestly, this is strange. There were times when I'd listen to the weather forecast 30 or 40 times in a day, and now there are times I'll go 3 or 4 days without looking at the weather. But we do fixate on some strange things. We should fixate on short and long-term forecasts, evapotranspiration, which is a combination of humidity, wind, and temperature. We've got weather stations on a golf course to give us that data. It helps us set our irrigation system. Soil moisture data, you've seen the things we poke in the ground that check for soil moisture. Golf schedule, we want to have the best conditions for various days, so we manipulate frost, soil temperature. Phenological indicators such as forsythia bloom and dogwood bloom are indicators when we apply certain chemicals, for example. So there's all kinds of things that we fixate on as golf course superintendent that maybe you're just not overly aware of. You might think, what a beautiful day. It's dry, it's breezy, it's 92 degrees. Oh man, let's go play golf. Enjoy it, Chris. I say, great, I'll be out there with a hose all day. Number 9, clear ongoing discussion about the expectations of the membership should be part of the budget discussion. This is actually absolutely true. It should be a two-way conversation. What do I mean by that? Well, Augusta National, you can imagine they've got expectations. Could you imagine what that might be? The best maintained golf course in the world? I don't know. Could it be something like that? Could you sort of picture that? If you were a Green Committee member there, your expectations would be pretty high. Anybody know this club? It's in Oregon. Bandon Dunes, it's fantastic. Both are fantastic places. If you've played them, if you've been there, they're fantastic places. But the expectations of Bandon Dune are radically different than Augusta National. They're more of a links-like, it's not links land because you can see there's a cliff there, but it's a link-like facility. They're all fescue. It's turning into POA now, but that's another story. Their expectations are quite high as well, but different. They're different expectations. And has anybody in this room begun their golf career in something like that? Have you experienced any of that? Okay, does that look familiar to any of you? And could they have expectations as well? Sure they could. It could be affordable golf, introduction to golf, a place to take a date, a place for you to take your grandson and learn the game of golf. And let me tell you something, maybe for that kid, that's the greatest golf course in the world right now, correct? And the beauty of these 3 facilities is what? It's playing the same game. Tee up the ball, hit the ball, find the ball, hit it, put it in the hole, put a score down, and have fun. They all have expectations. But having a conversation about what your expectations are, what it's going to cost, that's an important process. So that three-year planning process is a great way to achieve success. That strategic planning, that long-range planning, is a great way for your superintendent to help you achieve these things. It sounds simple. I teach budgeting at Rutgers, among other things, so it sounds simple, but the 3 steps of developing a good budget are this. Number 1, establish expectations. Number 2, determine what it's going to take to fulfill those expectations. And then 3, what it's going to cost, in that order. And the real problem we get is when clubs say, this is what we want, but they don't talk about this. There has to be this ongoing issue. It has to be a conversation all the way. Well, this is what we want, this is what's going to cost, we can't afford that. Okay, then let's go back and determine what we can afford. That's that balance point. When clubs get in trouble, it's when, remember this in high school? It's when the needs of the course are outweighed by the needs of the members. That balance point doesn't exist. And it has to, superintendents want a budget that balances the needs of the golf course. We talk about the needs of the golf course all the time. Here's a quote I use because it's fantastic. It's absolutely true. UCLA football coach Rick Neuheisel said, I was asked, why were you fired? And his answer was failure to meet or exceed underfunded expectations. Number 10, your superintendent must have a full and clear picture of your club's financial position. If they're not aware, if he or she is not aware of your finances, then there's a mistake. There should be aware of everything. What it costs to be a member, what it costs for a round, where your investments are, what your challenges are. Your superintendent needs to know these things. How does the money flow at your club? What are the financial headwinds in the near future? What are the needs of other departments? Are you entering a time of plenty, like right now, where we can invest in the club? And then are you ready to listen to what the superintendent has to say about the most important need? Because you might want to have fancy flash bunkers, and your superintendent might want to put drains in the ground. And having that conversation and listening is vital to success. Number 11, most clubs spend more money on their hazards than they do on their putting greens. In some cases, 2 or 3 times as much, which is bizarre to me, but it is. And this is a common lament among superintendents that putting hazards have, in the minds of many golfers, have become, we have to have groomed playing surfaces. And that's not the way the game started. So I did this graph of years ago. On our greens, 9% of our labor in July was spent on greens and rolling, so about 12%, and bunkers and bunker banks, 22% in the month of July. That's not even counting heavy washouts or spring preparation. At my club, probably twice as much money is spent on hazards than on the greens. And it's strange when you think about greens, 3 out of every 4 shot are hit 2 are on the greens. And that's not the case with bunkers. So just a challenge for you right there. I'm watering down sand here and panding down sand. Why? Because the sand is too penal. Finally, nobody, not a single person cares more about the golf course than your superintendent. Red, do you know the artist here? You're a historian. This is Ding Darling, who is an interesting cartoonist. I'm into the history of game, and this is something I collect. Anyway, so what does that mean? One of the things that we have to do as golf course superintendents is be able to shake it off. When we're not happy, we have to shake things off and move on. And this is a great quote from Ben Hogan. The most important shot in golf is the next one. I'm going to share one more quote with you, and that is from a good friend of mine who's the PGA member, PGA of America member, Mike Preston, who was at Echo Lake Country Club. Mike and I were good friends. I'm going to go visit Jeff. I'm going to go visit Mike very shortly, by the way. We talk all the time. But Mike taught me a lot about customer service and the importance of what we do. And every year he gives his new assistants a 2-page sheet of how that person is expected to act, and the last statement on that sheet is something I fully embraced and teach at Rutgers, and it says, members and their guests are not an interference to our work, they are our work. I think it's a great quote, and I try to embrace that all along. And I know we're running short of time, but I'm just going to go real quick. This is, you're about to raise your hand? No. Oh, okay. You gave me the fake move. I'm going to give you a bonus round. Everybody know Old Tom Morris? I'm going to show you 4 pictures of heroes of mine. Notice this is not a perfectly groomed bunker surface, just FYI. 3 ways you can become a hero to your superintendent and crew. Ready? Number 1, the Alistair McKenzie Society. What a difficult spell of weather you've been dealing with. Please let the crew know how much we appreciate all they are doing to help us get through this difficult period. That alone, something like that, can make all the difference in the world to the people who are preparing this golf course for you. Number 2, the Donald Ross Society. Show up at the shop on the second day of member guest. Before the crew goes out, it's going to be dark with some donuts and some coffee and a few kind words. And if you don't think that's going to go a long way toward making them feel good about the club and good about you, you're wrong. Why? Because this never happens, or rarely happens is a better way of putting it. This rarely happens. Here's an opportunity to say thank you to the people that take care of your golf course. And last, I'm going to go with the CB McDonald Fan Club. Thanks for aerifying the greens. I know that will make our course better throughout the season. And I swore I would retire when somebody did that to me. And then my last year, I lived to see that happen. Somebody came up to me on my last day, not my last day, last month of my employment. We were airifying greens, so it was pretty close to my last month. Hey, thanks for airifying the greens. I said, I know it's going to make the golf course better. It looks like hard work. So I've lived to see that. You're looking at a happy man. I hope you all have a great season of golf. Thank you.
Tremendous presentation, Chris. I think the one memory it clearly brings up is when you talked about the hours of a greenskeeper. And I think I was 17 and 18, and we were 5:30 to 1:30, or 5:30 to 2, and I wouldn't recommend that job for a 17-year-old, 5:30 to 2. But what you've done at Echo Lake, I've played it a few times over the last couple decades, and I'm also thrilled to see Rutgers. I always loved to see as a grad also. I think people don't realize how strong Rutgers is, not just in the state, but in the country in terms of what they do. So to have you as part of that program and help directing that program is huge. So thank you. We're going to take a break. We're probably about 10 minutes approximately. There's more coffee, et cetera, outside. So let's plan on 10:45 to be back.
It's nice when you can call on individual board members and they make a move. All right, we're back for our next presentation, and Mike's going to introduce them.
So a great start, great two presentations. We have a great two coming up. Rand Jarris, founder of Purple Valley Consulting. Historical consulting services to museums and golf clubs worldwide, which is obviously very relevant in New Jersey with our USGA museum. I worked for the USGA for more than 30 years as director of the USGA Museum and Library for 10 of those years. He's going to elaborate on the importance of really kind of milestones at clubs and the opportunities to preserve it. And I think I think the members really appreciate that. And I think, when they look back and they see the books from 10 or 20 years ago, and then, having the history is very meaningful. I mean, we're talking, this association was 1900. Many of these clubs are that same era, or even if it's 1950s, is now, we're talking, 75 years. So it's, the history is huge. So Rand.
Good morning to all of you. Just before I start, just wanted to, it's hard to follow Chris. In addition to what Mike shared about my time at the USGA, I oversaw the USGA Green Section for 10 years, and I was on the board of the NJSGA Foundation for 10 years, and came to have just tremendous respect for superintendents, for the turfgrass research community, and the incredible contributions that those folks make to the game every day. They are sort of the unseen and sometimes undersung heroes. I hope that our industry has been doing a better job educating GMs and club presidents and boards and supers about the work of superintendents, because it's really an invaluable service they provide to the game. History is my passion. History is what I love. But all those years at the USGA where I had the most respect, the most rewarding work that I did was the work that I did with the Green Section and the GCSA. And just, Chris, I wanted to acknowledge again all the great work that your community does, because I think it's such an important service to our game. My good friend Kevin Purcell invited me to come and speak to you this morning and share some perspectives about what it means to celebrate golf history, what it is that you might do as you're approaching an important milestone anniversary, whether it's 100 years, 75 years, 25 years of a club, of a golf course, of a clubhouse, or of an event. I just learned this morning about what they're doing at Montclair this year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the 1973 Women's Amateur. A lot of times we think about history in this context as being about the history of a club, but there's so many other aspects or moments in the history of a golf facility that can be celebrated. And I'd like to share some reflections with you this morning about how those moments can be celebrated, and as you do so, how you can strengthen the culture of your facility, how you can differentiate your brand. Because I think it's really important. We're in a competitive marketplace, and hopefully how some of that maybe translates to improving your bottom line. Let me start with a really simple statement. History matters. My job this morning, I don't think, is to convince you that history matters. There's been an awful lot of people who have come before me who have talked about how important history is, right? We all know. Those who don't know history are bound to repeat it. I don't want to talk about the fact that it does matter, but why it matters. And let me start with this simple thought that history matters because your customers say it matters. Right? Your golfers and your members. I went on Golf Club Atlas a couple weeks ago. I was just doing a little bit of research, and I found a couple different discussion threads, and I've got 2 slides here where I've pulled quotes from folks who are your members and are your golfers who are talking about why they think history is important. Our club has a history book and a closet full of old minutes, right? I wish our club would do more. It's not an uncommon sentiment that's out there. Our club has history, but it's a little more than a collection of trivia, right? There's always someone around the club who knows a lot of facts and a lot of sort of history about the club. People are asking their clubs and expecting their clubs and hoping their clubs will do a little bit more to help protect and preserve and celebrate the best parts of a club's culture, the best parts of that community, which may be its traditions or its values. There's a lot of folks who associate history efforts. There's some really high profile, like Marion Golf Club has an amazing archive room, which you're in and around the space at all. You've probably seen what Marion's done. Marion, Shinnecock, Pine Valley, right? These clubs that have sort of huge histories, and people think maybe history is the domain of the wealthy clubs and the private clubs. But history can be just as important at any club, at a public golf facility, at a public access facility. And the members, the golfers, they're out there and they're talking about, they're having these conversations in spaces that you may not be in on a daily basis, where they are asking for and hoping for the leadership at the clubs where they play and the golf course where they play, that they would do a little bit more to celebrate the history of the game. There are some clear benefits to having a strong club history program. Just put my notes here. A multitude of potential benefits. Some of them are really practical. History can be displayed throughout your clubhouse in a way that enriches and beautifies spaces in the clubhouse. Quite simply, make it a more attractive space to be. Equally, history can be an important inspiration for club events. When you're looking for special events and special moments on your calendar each year, to find those moments, those people, those events that happen in a club's history that you want to celebrate. So they can history can create atmosphere and support planning. Many clubs find that a well-maintained archive becomes an essential source for information about the club's operation. History of capital projects, when you want to know what was done to a clubhouse when it was done, what changes happened to a golf course and where they might be. If that information is not being collected, not being collated, not being stored in a way that you have access to it, you're losing a lot of your institutional memory that can be really significant for some of your operational efforts. Those inevitable moments where a board or a GM wants data about the history of dues increases. Where are you going to find that information? When did it happen? Is it accessible? And do you know what happened and what the reaction to your members or your customers were when you made those changes? Histories of tax assessments, other information that can help club members understand new initiatives or new agendas. Chris talked about the importance of strategic planning and long-range planning. Documenting the history and evolution of your golf course and your clubhouse so that those long-term planning efforts can be grounded in your past, that you know where you came from, what the activities were that you funded and pursued in the past to inform where you might be going in the future. I've heard, speaking of the superintendent community, There's a lot more interest among superintendents today in the history of their golf course. All these efforts around master planning to restore or take a golf course back to the architect's original intent. How do you know what the architect's intent was? Do you have that information? Do you have the plans? Do you have the notes of the meetings? Have you preserved the conversations that are going to allow the generations down the road in 25 or 50 or 100 years to know what the architect of your current master plan was thinking when they put in place a plan for your golf course for the future? Without this sort of historical grounding, we all understand and we know what happens, right? The new green chair comes in, the new GM comes in, someone wants to make a mark. They have a personal agenda that leads to changes in a golf course. And golf courses become these very organic living entities that just change through time. And a lot of times it's based on, again, personal agendas and personal preferences. And having a strong archive can help make sure that your golf course stays fundamentally grounded in its moment in time. A club's history can play an important role in orientation for new members, for new staff members when they come on board. The past is going to create the present, that present is going to create and help shape the future. Clubs need to remind their members why they were created and who they are. We often find in conversations with clubs that have rich histories that a lot of times new members are in fact attracted, right? That history becomes a sense of pride. It becomes a selling feature for the club. And when you walk into those clubs that cherish their history and celebrate their history, there's just a different feeling. There's a different atmosphere. There's an emotional reaction you have that you know you're part of history and tradition. Just because you haven't hosted a US Open, right? Just because you haven't hosted a state championship doesn't mean you don't have a story to tell. My role these days is helping clubs understand what those stories are, where those points of pride and differentiation are, and finding unique ways to make sure that we're preserving it, that we're presenting it, and that we're celebrating it to help shape the identity of a club. Identity is one thing you can't buy, or you can't replace it if it's lost. And then finally, I think this concept at the bottom, just about brand differentiation, is a really important point for everyone to consider. In this sort of consumer age where there's so much more information available to everyone, we're living in a world where just in any industry, in any business, consumers are smarter today than they've been before. Golf and country clubs are in the same sphere as restaurants, as churches, as places where we go to recreate, and then they're all in the business of selling experiences and cultural products that compete for people's time, they compete for people's money, they compete for people's attention. And the strongest clubs and the strongest golf courses are those that can differentiate themselves strongly in the marketplace. History matters because it helps you share your identity. And this is something I think that's increasingly become important over the last couple of years with the pandemic. We've seen so many new people enter the game, and we've seen so much turnover at most clubs. Morris County, and we're doing some work for Morris County Golf Club at the moment, and they called me up. We're creating new historical displays throughout the clubhouse, and Dan Bromwich, who's the GM, Dan said to me, our membership has changed so much. Our new members and our existing members, they don't know who we are. They don't know our story. And in this period of just tremendous change and turmoil, people are looking to history as a way to sort of ground themselves and differentiate themselves. So that's a little bit about the benefits of investing in a club's history. There are risks. The risks, quite simply, are lost history. The loss of history can be a very slow, almost imperceptible process. Most historical records are on paper. Paper's an organic organic material that naturally deteriorates, right? It's going to break down, it's going to produce gases and acids that deteriorate those papers. And if you're not taking the right steps to store your archives and your material and present them properly, they will start to degrade with time and you'll lose history. Photographs fade, right? So it can be this slow, imperceptible process. But then there's also the catastrophic moments, right? I mean, it's horrible to put this up on the screen, but it's a reality. The history of golf in so many ways, in so many clubs, has been shaped by the history of clubhouse fires. Morris County had two clubhouse fires that radically changed the direction and history of the golf course in the early 1900s, and they lost all their early records because of it. The fire at Oakland Hills last year spurred a number of clubs to take action to say, okay, what would we do if this happened to us? Are our minutes have our minutes been digitized? Can we access information? What about important photographs or important artifacts? So we even know what we have in the clubhouse should an event like this take place. A lot of people asked, sort of how destructive was the damage at Oakland Hills? Just look at the photograph on the right? They lost an incredible asset for the club. So much of their culture was sort of compromised, but they lost a lot of their history too. So what can we do to protect ourselves against catastrophic loss like this? I put a series of questions up here. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I would ask you to sort of take a look through. Can you answer every one of these questions for your club? Can you answer any of these questions for your club or your golf course facility? This is what fundamentally underlies or sits beneath a club's historical efforts. It's not just a matter of hanging old photographs on the wall and putting trophies in a trophy case. You need to really understand what you have, what the value of it is. Have you designated someone to be responsible for taking care of that history? Are you being good and responsible stewards of one of the most significant, although somewhat intangible assets of your club? This is a core part of your identity. Are you taking care of it properly? Lots of clubs will ask, when should we start? Right? I think, Kevin, when you called me, you may have said, a lot of clubs are celebrating their centennial, right? Centennials are really significant moments. But that your club may not be 100 years old. Your club may be 5 years old. Your club may have opened last year. You are celebrating a 1-year anniversary this year, right? Every club, no matter its age, has a history that needs to be protected and celebrated. And you have these anniversary moments. It really doesn't matter when you start, but look for those interesting moments. Look for those anniversaries. A lot of times they can be catalysts for galvanizing sentiment and support around the club for an effort to invest more substantively in your history. How do you start? Well, I hate to say this, but in any golf group, what's the way you start any single project? Right? We form committees. Committees are fun. Seriously, many clubs have a club historian, often a respected member of the club who's been around the club for a long time. They generally have lots of stories to tell, but that history is often shaped by their own agenda. Or at least by their personal experience in and around the club, their relationship, the events that they've been part of. The truth is that there's a limit to what any single storyteller knows. Maybe your club already has a committee, a history committee. In my experience, often older members of the club, again, who have certain preconceptions and may believe that they know the story of the club better than others. Don't cast those folks aside. They're great assets. They can help put stories to names. They can help identify faces and photographs. But think about putting together a thoughtful history committee. The very fact of its existence will signify to your customers and your members the value that you place on culture, on traditions, and on the values of the club. It doesn't matter what you name it. Some clubs, it's the History Committee, the Heritage Committee, the Archives Committee. Morris County, they named it the 1894 Committee. So they would always remember, and folks would be reminded of just how old the club is, what its heritage is. Put in place a reporting structure. Is that committee going to report to the GM like it does in some clubs, to the House Committee, to the board? Most clubs that I've seen Through the years, it reports, the History Committee will report into the House Committee and have a designated liaison up to the board. Assign a budget. Give that committee a budget. Make sure you're setting aside money in your facility budget each year so that you have alignment on how much you want to spend on these historical efforts, and you can start to think about the opportunities that sit there to you. I think contrary to popular belief, these efforts don't have to cost a ton of money. Centennial celebrations oftentimes are where clubs will find the largest annual increase in their budgets when they're celebrating history. I know of a club in the UK that actually put a 4% surcharge on annual dues the year of their centennial and completely broke even with all their efforts that they were trying to do. So they don't have to be huge expenses for the club. And what do you set them at work doing? Plan. Have them create a master plan. You have a master plan for your golf course. Have a master plan for your history efforts. Take an inventory of all the things that it is that you might do, prioritize those, align that plan with key stakeholders, with your finance committee, with your CFO, make sure the resources are in place, find the spaces in your clubhouse, and move forward. And it can be small steps, it can be grand steps, but if you have a plan in place, right, we take great efforts to manage so many parts of our business. Take steps to manage this key piece of your business too. And use that anniversary, whether it's a 25th or a 50th or a 100th, to start the conversation. You don't have to spend any money, just start a conversation, perhaps, about what history means to your club and how you'd like to be managing it properly moving forward. What to do next? Collect, right? This is the fundamental place to start. This is the do-re-mi of club history efforts, right? The place to begin. I'm not going to read through the list. There's a whole lot of things that are sitting around clubhouses, in boxes, in members' houses, in staff offices. Start to collate, bring all of that together, understand what you have and the stories it starts to tell about your history. Put in place a research effort. Reach out to your members. Talk to your staff. Talk to former staff members. Talk to your golf course superintendent. They often have tremendous resources about the history of the golf course that are sitting in the maintenance facility. Local libraries, historical societies, the USGA Museum. There's a tremendous amount of information available. That information age we live in today has made access to historical information far more robust than any other period of time. It is a great era to be a historian. Results will come, I guarantee you. This is, just threw up on the screen a couple things that we found while starting the work at Morris County in the last year. So in the first few months at Morris County, we uncovered the earliest known aerial photograph of the golf course. They just engaged a golf course architect to create a master plan for their wonderful Charles Blair McDonald and Seth Rayner golf course. Those of you who know Morris County well may have just raised an eyebrow. It is not just a Seth Rayner golf course, it's Charles Blair McDonald golf course. We've uncovered that in the last 6 months. We found the oldest aerial photograph. We found a tremendous number of newspaper stories about the founding of the club and the early years of the club, because newspapers have been digitized tremendously in the last 20 years. We found maps of the golf course. Down at the bottom is a map from 1915 that show changes in the golf course that they have long ago forgotten. Right? They had a history book that was published in 1994 that talks about the 3 golf courses at Morris County. They had 5. It was kind of an amazing thing. They had 5 versions of their golf course. They had completely lost track of 2 of them. But there's new information available today. One of my favorites is this gentleman on the far right. His name is James Ting. He was an early member at Morris County. He is better known in history as the first catcher in baseball to wear a catcher's mask. He was the catcher at Harvard University in the 1870s, and in a game at Harvard became the first catcher to wear a baseball mask. He went on to play professional baseball in Philadelphia, and in 1894 turned his attentions to golf, joined Morris County Golf Club, and one of the leading amateurs in the country in 1895. No one at the club had ever heard of him. No idea. The history is sitting there. It's waiting, but you have to put in focused efforts to go out and find it. And there's some amazing stories to tell about the importance of the club. Results will come, I guarantee you. Does this look familiar, right? How many clubs have this situation? You have a closet, you've got a room in the basement, maybe it's the GM's office, right? Oh, there's a box that's marked save, into which we save everything and we throw it in a corner, right? Morris County on the left. I'm doing some work for Biltmore Forest Country Club down in North Carolina on the right. Everybody starts with the simple thought of, we want a display. Ooh, that's what Dan's not here. Dan called me up and said, we want to put up displays. And I said, Dan, there's a process that starts before displays. We have to collect everything. We have to organize it. We have to understand what it is. We have to go out and research. The displays will come. Let's understand our history first. Let's understand what the stories are that we want to tell and where we're going to put it on display, right? So there's a huge effort just in organizing, sorting what you have, triaging, making sure that those artifacts are being taken care of properly, all right? And at Biltmore Forest, that room that I showed you, down in the basement of the clubhouse, humidity levels were at 90% in the summer. There were amazing old newspapers that had been thrown in the room that had turned yellow, they were brittle, and they were literally just crumbling, like you would touch them. And I walked in the room and I looked on the floor, and there's all these little scraps of newspaper, right, with 10 words, and I'm like, ugh, where did this come from? Where's the rest of the story, right? So we triage, we go in and we triage, and we make sure we get those artifacts in the proper storage condition, in proper environment first. We inventory it so we know what we have. We store it properly, and we secure it. Securing means giving it the proper security conditions. It's a locked room with limited access. Securing it means making sure we're providing the proper temperature and humidity controls. Securing it means insuring it. Do you know what the value of your historical assets is? I mean, literally, do you know the financial value of the paintings, the trophies, the clubs, the history that's around your clubhouse? If you have not been paying attention to sports memorabilia or golf memorabilia in the last year, the values have exploded. There are investment groups that are out buying sports memorabilia as an investment because what's happened in the stock market in the last couple of years, what's the projection for the new few years? Flat. Investing groups are buying up sports history because the value is going through the roof. Photographs, single photographs from the 1920s that were selling for $20 a year ago are selling for $2,000 to $3,000 today. A single historic photograph. You may be sitting on a significant financial asset, and you have a fiduciary responsibility as a GM, as a club owner, as a president, as a board, to make sure you're taking care of your historical assets and protecting them. I mentioned Marion, right? What do you do with all of this once you've started to create it? Where do you store it? Maybe you can display it. How do you share it? Marion's, I think, the leader. My longtime colleague at the USGA, Andy Much, has been working with Marion for a number of years to create a proper archive room. Andy, after he left the USGA, and Eric helped me 20 years ago, Andy's made a career of working with clubs to help them create both proper archive rooms, but also historic displays throughout the clubhouse. It can be a space like Marion. This is Nairn Golf Club over in Scotland. What they've done, they've just found a small place in the attic, right? Up under the eaves, they've fitted it out. They've put everything in secure place. They have it on display. It doesn't have to be fancy. This is what we're doing at Biltmore Forest. There were 60 boxes of club records, of minutes, of annual reports, of yearbooks, of photographs that they had no access to because it had never been organized. They celebrated their centennial last year, and as they were celebrating their centennial, they said, wait a minute, what's happening in the basement, right? So not leading up to, but the centennial became the catalyst among club leadership and among the memberships to make an investment in history. And we're just taking, at this point, we're taking everything we're getting into proper archival storage. This is not an expensive project. spent $6,000 on archival supplies and storage furniture to make sure that their history is being taken care of properly. Yes, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a wonderful and beautiful archive room like Marion has, but it doesn't have to cost a lot of money to make sure you're taking care of history properly. Another Andy project at Exmoor Country Club out in Chicago. This is now we're moving from archiving, which is behind the scenes, to display, right? Bring it out front for your members to see it. Have a plan for what you're going to display and where. A lot of times, early history of the club is in the front of the clubhouse. Help people understand where you were formed, why you were formed, and bring those forward. Historical trophies, beautiful displays of just framed photographs. They can significantly enhance and improve the experience that you have when you're in the clubhouse. This is Oakmont. If you've not had the pleasure of being out to Oakmont, Oakmont's done a wonderful history project. Another former USGA colleague, David Normoyle, led this project out at Oakmont. You can see at Exmoor they had built in a lot of cases on the walls. Here at Oakmont, they've just brought in some modest display cases where they can change out artifacts every couple months and just refresh that history and tell new stories. Photographs and cases in the wall. Huntington Valley, this is another of Andy's projects down outside Philadelphia. This was basically an unused space in the clubhouse, or an underutilized space in the clubhouse. You can see Andy helped them design and construct built-in cases in the walls. They've got artifacts displayed throughout the room. This is now the most popular event space in the clubhouse. And I was reading some comments that Andy made about this a couple years ago, that they have paid for this room more than 10 times over because it is now such a popular space for events, for weddings, for parts of the club. So history can pay for itself when you're creating new and beautiful spaces. At Biltmore Forest, they've simply gone out and bought off-the-shelf display cabinets, right? So you can go to that end of custom, high-end, and invest a lot of money, or you can just simply hang photographs throughout the clubhouse and go out and buy some display cabinets in a nice furniture shop and bring that history out of the archive room and put it on display. There are solutions for every budget to help you bring history forward. Club histories, right? Club histories are really popular for centennials or 50th anniversaries. I'm involved in a current project right now where we're actually writing a course history, and I think this is the first of its kind. So Chicago Golf Club is celebrating the 100th anniversary of its absolutely spectacular Seth Rayner Golf Course next year in 2023. And John Moran, who's the historian out at Chicago, called me up and asked if I would partner on this project. And we're reimagining what a club history could be because we're writing the history of a golf course instead. So it's not about who the members were and right, every club history that has this formula, and they get really problematic because every member wants to see their own photograph somewhere. We're setting all of that to the side and saying, look, we're just going to write a history of the golf course. So is your golf course 50 years old or 100 years old? Your club may be 114, but maybe your golf course, because you redid the golf course in the 1920s, is approaching that anniversary. These projects can be lavish and expensive. They can be fairly simple publications. They can be digital publications. But there is so much interest today in golf course architecture and golf course history that there are new opportunities and avenues to explore. One of my favorite ways to celebrate history is an oral history. This costs just about nothing because every one of you can record audio on this today, right? Find your oldest members, find the people with the interesting stories, just talk to them. Capture, record, preserve the stories and the history. You will be grateful down the road. We started an oral history project at the USGA for its centennial back in 1994. We ended up interviewing about 80 of the most prominent names in golf history. And now we have Mickey Wright for 6 hours on audio. We've got 12 hours of Gene Sarazen talking about his experiences in the 1920s and 30s, sharing his memories of Bob Jones. Oral history is powerful, and it is not an expensive undertaking. Create a website. Create a website. Create a web page on your website that celebrates your history. Baltusrol, I think, has one of the nicest presentations of its history. It's not elaborate, but for the members, for their guests who are coming, for the general public. It helps them understand who they are, where they came from, and what the club values and respects. Put your history on social media. There are clubs who are doing that, right? Put it on your Facebook page. Create an Instagram page for club history. People will follow, people will watch. It will help enrich their experience. Many clubs have galas, special events, black tie affairs for a centennial. Some of my favorites are the informal. This is a public golf course out in, I think it was Minnesota. And you can see the guys are just standing around in their shorts, right? They've just played, but they're taking a moment. They found a way to celebrate their history that is a much lower cost solution to the black tie gala. Digitization. Can't talk about history today without digitization, because I think that's the other most common conversation that I have with clubs. They either want to build a display or they want to digitize everything. A word of caution, and I call it the digital conundrum. Digitization is not a preservation process. A lot of people think it is. Oh, we're going to digitize it, then we've preserved it forever. It's the 8-track tape conundrum. My grandfather had all these amazing Kenny Rogers 8-track tapes that we used to listen to in his Buick as we drove around. This 8-track is, 50 years old, 40 years old at this point. I defy anyone in this room to be able to play this. Anyone have an 8-track tape player? Right. How about 4.5-inch floppy disks? Have those in your office, right? Nobody can access that information. This is a 4,000-year-old piece of Egyptian papyrus. I can't read ancient Egyptian, but if I could, I have full and complete access to every piece of information that's on that page. Paper is still the best long-term storage mechanism for information in history. Digitization is not a preservation process. What it's really good for is transforming historical records and information so that we can access it today. This is one of the things we generally advise clubs to do. Don't put your original photographs and your little original documents out on display. Scan them, reproduce them. You can enlarge them, you can enhance them. They make better presentations when they're in a digital format, and we can manipulate them. They're easy to access, but then store those records for long-term care. The USGA actually, what we ended up doing there is renting space out at Iron Mountain in western Pennsylvania. It's an old salt mine down underground, and there's about 200 boxes full of USGA records, copies of its minutes, all its important publications and information, in case there's ever, God forbid, an Oakland Hills moment in Liberty Corner. That information exists in another form and elsewhere, and it's in paper form, because we know that 2,000 and 3,000 years from now, if we've kept it in the right conditions, temperature-wise and humidity-wise, we'll have access to all that information. Think about whether it's your Constitution, Certificate of Incorporation, deeds, early minutes, important photographs. They're great things to digitize. Just know that they're not a long-term preservation solution. They're for access to help make your history available to folks. Final thought, if you're looking for that special initiative, really for any anniversary, a 25th anniversary, a 50th anniversary, a 100th anniversary, there are some more expensive things that clubs can do that I think are wonderful ways to celebrate history. Trophy replicas. Have you hosted a USGA championship? Have you hosted a state championship? Kevin, I don't know if you guys do trophy replica programs. Some of the AGAs do. Acquire those trophies. They're beautiful pieces. When you walk into Clubhouse at a club and you've seen those trophy cases with a US Open trophy and a PGA Championship trophy or a Ryder Cup trophy, right? You instantly know and understand and appreciate you're someplace special. The USGA and PGA both have replica trophy programs. Think about an investment, portraits. Celebrate important people in your club's history, whether they're a great player that was a member at your club or founder of the club. Portrait programs, conservation programs, are there significant artifacts that have deteriorated? There are ways to help restore and protect those artifacts long-term. They tend to be expensive interventions, but perhaps there's ways to fund those Historic designation. We get a lot of questions about that in the last couple of years. Oakmont was the first golf course, to go on the National Registry of Historic Places. Baltusrol has now done the same. A number of clubs are finding historic designation, being placed on the National Registry, a really important place to protect the golf course, to protect your assets against change, against development in adjacent properties, against even closure in some instances. And clubs are now wising up and they're starting foundations. There are a couple of clubs that have set up separate C3 foundations simply for their historical preservation efforts. And they're finding members who are willing to donate because it's a C3, willing to donate to support those efforts to make sure the history of the club is preserved long term. Finally, just tell the world. Make sure your members and your customers know what you're doing. Make history visible. Promotion is really important. Include a note about maybe a newly acquired historic artifact in a newsletter. Include little stories about club history in your newsletter. Rotate the artifacts and the images that are on display to make sure that that history stays fresh. And create events around some of those special moments. This is a final thought. I know a club here in New Jersey that recently lost 2 members who had been with the club since the early 1940s. And of course, the club didn't just lose friends. Those personal relationships are important, but these 2 deaths left really large gaps in their collective understanding of the club's history. Don't let that happen to you. Make sure you're finding those stories, finding those people, understanding who they are to help create a legacy. We live in an unhistorical age, in a lot of respects, in an anti-historical age. A lot of people think history, was 3 weeks ago, or 2 months ago. But if we look a little bit further back, a little bit deeper, we often find that our culture and our traditions and our values have much deeper and much older roots. Your club is not just a place where people go to hit a little white ball a certain distance into a hole in the ground. It becomes a second home for a lot of people. It becomes a community that they're proud to be a part of, that becomes part of their own identity. And history can help build that sense of loyalty. It creates traditions. Importantly, it creates, I'll call it a soul. It creates a soul for the golf club. I would just encourage you to think about ways to leverage your next major milestone to enhance your culture and to strengthen your brand. I'll leave you with this quote, from John, the historian at Chicago that I mentioned. He said this to me when we were talking just a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was great. I was scribbling frantically as he was talking. Many club presidents and GMs want to leave a legacy. Maybe it's new carpeting in the clubhouse or a new bunker on the 8th hole. Those will be undone at some point down the road. But if you make those steps to preserve your history, to document the history, to celebrate the history, it's going to leave a mark that will last forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Rand. That was a great presentation. Our association is going to be turning 125 in a couple years, and we're talking with Rand about helping us preserve and really acquire some of the history of our own association, because our archives are probably like your archives in a box under my desk or in some of the filing cabinets. We're lucky enough to have some of our past presidents who were here when it all began, but we're looking forward to putting some real effort into putting a real mark on our own history. So now I'd like our golf professionals to come up for our panel, and we'll slide right into our last presentation. All right, I've got the pleasure to introduce my friends here. We have Don McCabe down on the end from Plainfield Country Club, Reed Lansinger from the Canoe Country Club, my good friend and personal golf professional, Jason Fiore from my club at Forest Hill, and and Andrew Bostrom from Greenbrook. Andrew Bostrom is going to be leaving our area. They're going to be leaving this section. He just got a job out in LA, so we wish Andrew the best in that position. And unfortunately for us at Forest Hill, Jason has decided to take that job at Greenbrook. So congratulations to those two guys and their opportunity to move forward. We're going to have Rebecca Gaona, our communications manager, be the moderator for the panel. So Rebecca, if you'll take over.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm sure as he prefaced, we have 4 influential guys up here, members of the NJPGA, and I'm sure we're all very eager to hear their perspective of where we're at in the golf industry. So, Don, we're going to get started with you, and guys, feel free to chime in wherever you see fit. The NJSGA just got back from the Allied Golf Association conference, and a lot what that was mentioned there was that, you know, record-breaking participation, revenue, more players, more play, thus more work for your staff and everyone at your golf clubs. How has the recent golf boom affected the golf profession, both at the golf course and outside of the golf course?
Yeah, well, sure. You know, I think it's a great question, and overall, when you think about the golf boom that's really happened over the last few years, it's been amazing for us golf professionals. It's been super healthy for our clubs with facility usage going up. Just as a business in general, it's so healthy. But for us, being club professionals, listen, our lesson demand has gone up. Our golf instruction programs demand has gone up tremendously. And all of our tournament programs that we try and run have gone up tremendously. So there are a lot of great positive things that have come from this boom. With that, I wouldn't call them cons. I would say new challenges that have sort of arisen because of this boom. Ultimately, you know, as I mentioned, the demand and more rounds are going up, but the number of staff members on our teams have not gone up. So really what we're trying to do is to do more with less, essentially. And at the same time, the standards and the expectations for the golf experience that we provide, that is just as high as ever. And the member expectation has not dipped. You know, that has stayed just as high as ever. So that really is the challenge. We're trying to maintain those expectations and provide these great experiences to our members and our guests, again, with the same amount of staff as before. So that really is the challenge. And for us, you know, personally, it comes down to being better at managing your time. You know, we're teaching lessons, doing club fittings, running tournaments, and we have more people showing up to play golf and more people on the golf course. And that can really backfire if we're not great at managing our time and staying on top of those things. With that, you know, it also, you know, the other side of that spectrum is how do you manage your staff on a daily basis? Because we're all working more. We're all in a little bit more of a stressful environment. How do we avoid burnout in our staff? Because when we get to you know, the middle of July and our team is burnt out and they're tired and they need a break, which is pretty common, that member and guest experience is going to suffer ultimately. So, you know, that's kind of been the challenge, I think, over the last few years for us adjusting to this new norm of being really busy all the time. Outside of golf, personally, and you know, I think I speak for a lot of golf professionals, you really just appreciate your time off now more than ever because we are working harder than ever when we're at work.
Anyone else want to add anything?
Summed it up pretty well.
I mean, at the same time, this is a huge positive too, that so many people want to play golf. So I think, you know, as we talk today, you think certainly you'll hear those themes that golf's in a great place, and we just want to figure out how to just maintain that momentum as we move forward together.
Yeah, it's certainly not a bad problem to have.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, this one's for you. The golf professional role has evolved over the last 30 years. Now that there are professionals who now serve as PGA general managers, assistant GMs, director of golf, director of instruction. How does this affect the daily job of the club professional?
Right. So, you know, I think can speak for all the PGA professionals in the room. Part of the job is wearing a lot of hats. And for those of you who are members at clubs, you see your PGA professionals wearing a lot of hats. So that's certainly something we're accustomed to. And I think some of the best PGA professionals, they're always looking at their clubs or facilities as to, you know, how can I improve the member experience here, right? How can I be an asset to my club? And so we've seen a trend, you know, certainly in New Jersey, I can think of plenty of examples where PGA professionals have become general managers at their facilities or COOs, right, and taken on a larger role. You know, for me, I took on a larger role, you know, as assistant general manager just 3 years ago. It was kind of in conjunction with us launching a new club model. We had a membership director who had just moved on, and Steve Wolski, our GM there, and we kind of put our heads together to try to think about how are we going to fill that void. And so it really just came to a point to where we looked at what needed to get done and tried to figure out how I could be, you know, an asset to the operation. So I took on, you know, a lot of the membership responsibilities, you know, the outing sales, everything from our marketing strategy to our member communications. I think it made me a better golf professional too, to Don's point earlier. Just I had to manage my time better, and then just lead, you know, not just the golf operation, but other areas of it as well. So I think it'll be very interesting to see a lot of these PGA general managers, especially in the section. We'll have a front row seat, and we'll just see what that continuity for them in those roles looks like going forward. So,
Reed, you're the director of golf at Canoe Brook. How does that role differ from, you know, a head golf professional role?
It's just more people. The numbers are just different. You know, my staff is one of the larger staffs in New Jersey, probably. It doesn't mean it's big enough yet, but you know, I have resources there, but then I also have you know, X number of more members to meet with and create relationships with and help them on the golf course on a daily basis. And so the numbers are just, you know, they're just different in terms of the amount of stuff going on. And, you know, I have more people to help me with it as well. But, you know, again, wearing the different hats is, I wish more of it had to do with golf stuff, but it's now strayed away from that, I guess, is project management. You know, helping the club design new facilities that are going to enhance the golf experience. It's, you know, training different staff to do different things that were things that maybe I did a couple years ago, and now my job has morphed into something different. Certainly running the store is something that is one of my primary concerns, and so we're expected to be a retailer at the same time that we're expected to be a coach. Heaven forbid a player. You know, we still love to play this game. So, you know, again, you wear as many different hats as you can, and I think one of the tricky parts for all of us, right, is to maintain some level of proficiency at all of those things. Because when you don't club fit for a while, well, your club fitting skills, they take a dip. When you don't teach for a while, well, then your teaching skills take a dip. And then certainly we know what happens when we don't practice this great game. So you're making sure that you are managing your time on what you want to be good at or what is important to your club members to be good at. That's a whole nother way of managing your time that maybe we don't talk about as much as, okay, an hour for email, okay, an hour for a lesson, okay, 20 minutes for lunch, right? An hour for, you know, just going through the lunchroom and maybe having conversations with your members. So that time management is different than, you know, your you getting better at your job, and how do you manage your time to make time for getting better at your job.
Awesome. Jason, this one's for you. As we all know, technology has changed the course of many industries. There are tools, both the instruction side, tournament management side, like TrackMan, Golf Genius, Blue Golf, that has altered the modern day professionals' daily operations. Can you talk about the differences between pre-internet golf professionals and the current professional?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple of different ways to kind of look at that. First of all, from like a teaching and coaching standpoint, I know when I first started, you know, with the PGM program and even others with the GPTP before me, it was all about, you know, the ball flight laws and kind of learning how the club face related to the club path, and you kind of look at the different shots. Okay, well, if that ball started off left and curved right, you must have been outside in with an open club face, and kind of the ratio between those two. And now, even more so than a teaching standpoint, but also a club fitting standpoint, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. When you have a flight scope or a TrackMan giving you objective data, that you can go back to your student or your end user and say, okay, you were 3.5 degrees outside in with a tack angle of -6, let's say. So that's just a huge advantage for us to be able to confidently communicate that, or you're fitting for a driver and maybe the ball ballooned up and you say, okay, well, your spin rate was probably too high. Well, no, it was 3,500 RPMs now. We can actually say it was too high for your club head speed. So that's a huge advantage that we have post-internet, you could say, versus pre-internet. Also, just from a tournament administration standpoint, I mean, what took, the golf pros of yesteryear 2 days to prep for a tournament for calligraphy or hand-dotting scorecards now takes us 2 hours. There's a lot less human error involved with it as well. You enter the names into the GIN, and out comes some beautiful scorecards and score sheets. So that's great. And finally, for the end user, again, members or just or golfers in general, having a live leaderboard. I mean, how cool is that? Being able to kind of scoreboard watch, and you have 4 holes left, you're down by 2, we got to step on the gas, make some birdies, where, the old days you'd hand in a scorecard and kind of look at the board, oh man, we lost. So there's a lot of advantages to technology we take advantage of now that we're very happy about.
And I'll just kind of add on to that as well. We've talked even through, some other presentations from Chris as well today, just as far as finding good people, and certainly something we'll talk about more with the panel as well. But, ultimately it comes down to, like Don said, having to do more rounds, more action with the same number of people. So we need to be more efficient within our operations, right? And so we have to use technology to do that. With the integration of Golf Genius really kind of industry-wide now, something that when we brought on Golf Genius for all our events, 6 or 7 years ago, it wasn't nearly as heard of. But I think we're seeing more and more clubs with live scoring, fewer and fewer clubs always printing out scorecards as you go along. So for those of you who kind of go back to your clubs and your golf committees, just take a look at some of the live scoring options, and even just think about trying some events without printing those scorecards. And again, every club is so different, right? And you have to look at, what kind of staffing levels you have. But if you're looking for more efficiency and really more effort to the member experience, there's some things to do. And the best people to talk to is the PGA professional at your club. So just kind of encourage you to look at that from a tournament standpoint as well with Golf Genius.
I suspect you guys will all each be able to answer this question, but we'll start it off with Reed. With this golf boom has come more golf outings, more lessons, more hours put in at the golf course, and during the off season. What is the makeup of your staff, and how are you scheduling them over the course of the season?
Yeah, it's funny, my staff makeup has not really changed a whole lot in terms of the number of people and how I set it up. We have 4 assistants, director of instruction, golf shop manager, 3 interns. I have 6 or 7 full-time outside guys. And that really hasn't changed over the last 3 years. But what it has changed is some of those assistants used to be seasonal. They used to be here for 6 months or so. The interns were largely just there in the summer. But what it's morphed into now, and especially with, the season seems to be kind of getting a couple weeks longer on either end, especially in the fall. And, we have now an indoor facility in the wintertime, and the demand for instruction programs in the shoulder seasons has gotten bigger. So my staff numbers haven't necessarily changed, but the amount of months that they work has changed. And so obviously that takes resources, that takes a certain amount of payroll, infrastructure to, push, okay, you're going to work 4 to 6 weeks longer than you ever have before. And, maybe you're only getting 4 to 8 weeks off in the downtime months. And then I would say that that's been a benefit to those workers, and it's sort of a double whammy, because it helps us take care of our members better, but then it also helps retain those employees now, given the idea that, hey, you're heading towards a full year-round employment scenario versus, hey, you got to go down to Florida, sorry, like you got to move twice a year, you got to, find another job, and, that's helpful in certain scenarios, but then where all of our clubs are struggling with is like, finding those good people. And then when you do find them, you got to hold on to them a little bit longer than you used to, where, 20 years ago, I think it was an unwritten rule where if you were an assistant at a club more than like 4 seasons, well, that was a long time. You got to move on. And I think that has changed a little bit, and certainly that's something that at Canoe Brook I am pushing hard for a veteran crew that our members know and recognize is very important. But in retaining veteran people, what does that take? It takes resources. And so I think my first assistant has now been with me for 7 years. I look at him more like a head pro, if you will. And then my secondary assistant has been with me all that time as well. And then my current third assistant, he is in a position where I don't see him leaving for 3 or 4 seasons. And so I'm really excited about the continuity that provides. I'm very, gracious of the resources that the club has given me. And in return, again, the benefit to the members comes back, because it's not walking in the door and being like, oh yeah, who are these guys? I'm looking at name tags. I'm trying to figure out who's who. No, it's Garrett, it's Joe, it's Dave. They know who they are. And that familiarity has really, helped our operation.
Anyone want to add anything?
When I think, speaking about staff retention, right, what does that affect the most, right? It affects, for example, how much time Reed has to spend with his team, and that affects the member experience, not just with Reed's time to interact with the members, but then also his staff and the staff knowing them as well. So it all comes back to, our customers, right? Whether it's members, whether it's just, public play, whatever it is. That's the emphasis of all this. So it just, there's cause and effect all the way down.
We wanted to mention one thing in regards to an old article that came up with Golf Digest last year, and how that there was this Club Pro crisis. I don't know if any of you remember reading that article. And it was painted as sort of like we're at a crossroads, like golf professionals, this is a terrible work-life balance scenario, all this kind of stuff. And I think that one of the big things that our crew and our New Jersey PGA board and every golf professional, not only in the room but in the area want to understand and share with people is that, yes, there are certain scenarios that are out there where golf pros are, in bad situations or whatever the case might be. But there is a tremendous opportunity for growth as a golf professional in not only this area but in the country right now. And I think that article took a negative tone, and what we wanted to shed light on was more so the idea that, just like the superintendent thing, where there are way more open superintendent positions than there are available assistant superintendents, it's the same in the golf professional ranks. If you look in New Jersey right now, I know that there's 10 to 15 assistant job openings in the state, and I'm sure it's that way in Philadelphia. I'm sure that's the way in Met section, and we're the popular area to be at. Imagine what it's like in Buffalo or upper like northern New York or Maine, or we were just at our sort of our District 1 and District 2 PGA meetings, and I got to sit with other golf professionals who are from those other areas, and I can't remember the name of the club outside of Buffalo, but how are you supposed to attract an assistant pro to Buffalo? That's got to be hard. So, again, there is this issue, but at the same time, man, if you're an interested person in golf, or you're wanting to make a career change, or you're thinking about, man, I really like the idea of being at the golf course every day, now is the best time ever to get into the business. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity, and one of the knocks on it in the past has been maybe not the highest pay versus other entry-level starting positions, say with, I always use PricewaterhouseCoopers as an example because my brother works for that company. But if you're getting out of college and, the money was this for PwC and the money is this at your local golf club, you were making that other decision. But compensation and salaries has gone up over these last 3 years, pretty much across the board. And I'm overgeneralizing that, but now is that great time to get in there. So I want you to think about this as, yes, work-life balance can be somewhat difficult, and we're expected to be on property every day versus, many of our members have been able to work from home or work remotely, and so that's led to more time for golf. Golf professionals wouldn't be very good at their jobs if they were working remotely. Now, we can do emails and stuff like that from home, but you want us to be there, and we want to be there for you, right? That's what helps us make us good at our jobs. And I think that, again, that article's negative. We want to paint this as more of, now's the time to get into the business. Now's the time where the opportunity is better than it's been before, financially and from a position standpoint.
That kind of transitions us to our next question. Jason, every successful organization is run by a good team. What do you find are the biggest challenges in forming a productive and pleasant team?
That's a good question. I would say that probably one of the most important things that we like to do at Forest Hill is just whenever we make a hire, just talk to that person and really kind of see what makes them tick and kind of what motivates them. And I've had many great assistants. One's sitting over there in the audience there, but they kind of all have been motivated by different things. So for instance, one might just really want to become a head golf professional. So if that's the case, you want to just be an open book to them and really try to give them as much responsibility as possible so that when they go for their interviews, they're ready. Not that this is what they would do, this is what they have done, whether it's creating open to buy plans or creating schedules, just really preparing them for the next step. Or it could be someone who maybe wants to start a family and they are more financially motivated. So you try to create different revenue streams for them to try and grow that. So, or maybe someone just is motivated by playing golf. So you schedule, play time with the members on a Saturday or Sunday morning and make sure they play in all the pro-ams. Is really just about making sure that and following up with them as well, making sure that they're realizing those goals along the way. But making sure that each member of your staff is happy, because at the end of the day, a happy staff really makes a productive one too. So just taking an interest in each person individually and tailoring that approach.
And I'll just add one thing to that as well. Like, we typically will send out with the New Jersey PGA, a financial compensation survey, right? So this year we're actually sending out a well-being survey, really trying to gauge, how our professionals in the section are feeling about their job. And anyway, more to come on that, and that's really for the section professionals. But again, just another way to kind of think outside the box and just kind of have some data to go off of as we move forward together.
That brings us to our next question. Don, can you share some ideas and points to maybe attract potential staff members and to also boost retention?
Sure. I think I would start by saying, outside of the obvious, looking around at, like clubs in your area, obviously the compensation needs to be somewhat competitive if you want to attract the best assistants that you possibly can. But there are plenty of other ways that you can market your club and the position to these prospective employees. Reed, I know at Canoebrook, I've seen you've put out job brochures where it's bigger than a job description. You highlight the club itself and the history and some of the other benefits that you would get to go into work at your club. And that's really what you're looking for as somebody who's looking for an assistant position. You say, hey, this is a club and this is a program that's well established. If I go there, it would probably be a pretty big benefit for me in my career. But you can do other things, tournament and education allowance. Us assistants, not that we're not getting paid well enough, but we're also not making an incredible amount of money. So being able to have a fund at the club where they support your education or your growth or some tournament entry fees, that goes a long way as well in attracting, really the best assistants that you can possibly attract. One other thing of note is, we've put in place educational seminars at our club. So for your lower level employees, that's something that you can use to market, whether it's a resume building workshop. You can do for your golf employees some sort of teaching seminar, club fitting seminar. So ways that they can get better and learn from the people that are a little bit more experienced at your club. I think those are all great ways to attract your staff. In terms of retention, I think that, again, we talked about the work-life balance, and work-life balance is so important. Working for somebody that understands that you also need to have a life outside of work as well is now more important than ever, especially in the current, state of the labor market. People don't want to work 12-hour days. They don't want to work weekends. And being able to, kind of work with them and say, hey, all right, we'll give you, maybe a weekend off a month, or finding creative ways to do that helps with, keeping them on board and keeping them there for several years, which, again, as Andrew mentioned, really helps that member experience that you provide at your club. And that's really what goes a long way. So it's creating a great culture at the club, understanding what your individual employees really want and need and where they want to be in their careers. When you focus on that, that's how you start to retain people, I think, maybe better than in the past.
Reed, I know Don just mentioned you created a pamphlet of some sort for employees. Can you explain a little bit about that and how you keep your employees happy?
Well, so the brochure was for a job description that I posted for an open assistant position, and basically, in the past, a job description was sort of like 1 page long, and compensation was sort of buried in the bottom, and there wasn't a whole lot of detail other than like, hey, I need a golf pro. And, more than ever, these clubs and our fellow professionals have to sell the position. It would be like selling anything else. You sell a car, you create fancy pictures and you create, the different things that, are outfitted in the car. And that goes for the same thing as selling this job. And it's not just about, hey, come work at Canoe Brook, but hey, what can Canoe Brook do for you? And what can our large staff, where this guy's an expert in this and this guy's an expert in this, and oh, by the way, a couple of these guys have moved on to their own head professional positions, detailing who those people were and putting faces and names on that sheet, pictures on that sheet. Here's the history of the 2 golf courses. Here's the workout center. Here's the indoor facility that you can use in the wintertime. Here's the tournament allowance number. Here's the uniform allowance number. And so now all of a sudden you've given, mine is like almost 10 pages worth of data, pictures, examples on what working at Canoe Brook is going to be like. And so when somebody applies for the job, or somebody might be interested in the job, is that, these guys are really good at what they do. But no offense, but like my brochure looks better than the next guy's.
Yeah.
And how can I attract the limited number of candidates that are out there to Canoe Brook? And I'll give you a more real-world example. How can I attract a golf pro to Canoe Brook knowing that Baltusrol is right down the street? Really hard. I have this elephant in the room right next door, and I worked there, so I know it really well. But, I want to make sure that, I'm at least on par to what, Ryan and the awesome membership of Baltusrol is offering their professionals. How can I make that Canoe Brook specific and make it better and attract people that way? And that was just one super small example of something that took me, 3 nights on my laptop while I'm watching basketball on TV. And I think that there was a scenario where golf professionals, at least in the last maybe 15 years, have they got used to the idea of you could press a button, something would appear on PGA.org, and then they would just get candidates. Or they would make one email to their peers and say, I need a guy, and they would get a guy. Well, those days of recruiting are sort of over, and so recruiting has become as competitive as like college football recruiting is. It's sort of a, you got to really put your best foot forward, and you got to really be creative, and you got to really dig deep into your networks and into the non-traditional maybe labor markets. And this goes back to what something is that Chris said is the already employed, the underemployed, the help me out here. What else did he say? You get my point, right? So, to that example, the recruiting thing is very, very competitive now, and you have to differentiate yourself.
Great points.
This is just one kind of add-on to Chris's presentation earlier, what you should know about your golf professional and what they're going through each day, right? So, yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Reed, we'll keep it with you. Does your club leadership and board understand the current challenges in your role, and what can the clubs do to help?
Yeah, it's funny. I have going on a 2-year-old now, and my most recent club president, Bob Cashel, he'd come into me and check on me like once a month or so, and he'd come in and go, when was the last time you took a day off? I was like, I took last Thursday afternoon off or something like that. And I sort of work a 7-day schedule, but I don't work all day every day. And I was telling Andrew this morning, sometimes I'll go in for 2 hours on a Sunday just so my Monday's easier. And that's just the way that I operate. But you got to really be careful with, again, we mentioned burnout before. But I think that our club, specifically at Canoe Brook, and we have a large board, and we have a lot of people on that board who are really smart. I think one of the things that they've realized is that their human capital at the club is really important. And when they set expectations with us, or I should say it as we work together to set the expectations, right? And so those are conversations that we have with handicap chairman, golf chairman, greens chairman, club president, general manager, and then one of our most important people, our CFO at the club, to determine, again, how can those expectations be funded the right way, to steal Chris's Rick Neuheisel line again, right? And making sure that, you know, those expectations, the dollars match. And I think that our club has done a really good job of being proactive with not only raising dues, but then being able to use that money to fund the human capital thing. And so right now, Canoe Brook's dues are going up X number of dollars. And I think a majority of that number is going towards human capital, which, you know, again, payroll. So again, that's a great thing to see. Now we're investing in other things as well, but if your clubs are being fiscally responsible, that raise in payroll is easy, right? If we're not raising dues on a regular schedule, that payroll increase or just a cost of living increase can be really destructive to a club's budget. So I would urge all leaders in the room, just make sure you have that conversation with your golf professional, with your superintendent, with your rackets guy, knowing some of the challenges that each individual faces. We like to paint like a really rosy picture all the time because we want to, you know, be looked at, you know, fondly in the eyes of the people that we work for. But if you, my old golf chairman used to tell me, like, hey, if there's a problem, you got to tell me. The last thing I want to do is find out from some other member that there was an issue. So I think that that is the same with the challenges that we face, right? Is I'd rather tell them and have somebody help me with the problem solving than come to them when the problem is so bad that that even they can't help fix it.
So we've mentioned burnout in this discussion a little bit, but many golf professionals are working 7 days a week throughout the golf season. How do you and your staff, you know, stay motivated, and how do you manage work-life balance? Give it to you first, Jason.
Yeah, that's it's definitely a challenge, especially since everyone's mentioned that the golf boom has really taken a foot the last few years. And I think the one thing that we've done at Forest Hill, and everyone's different, every club is different in this sense, but we have got close to 35 corporate events through the course of the year, whether it's Mondays or Tuesdays or Thursdays. And then our memberships, you know, their work schedule has changed, whether they work from home or a hybrid schedule, so our tee sheet during the week has exploded. So really the priority for an all-hands-on-deck scenario on Saturday and Sunday has kind of changed and has pivoted to where now we're a lot more necessary to be on board on the Monday golf outings when it's a $40,000 corporate event or even more, or just when the Friday afternoon tee sheet is packed. So it's really important. And then kind of to Reed's point, as far as it's becoming more of a year-round position, to kind of normalize a situation where, you know what, if we have an assistant golf pro who's not there on a Saturday, the head golf pro, the starter is there, the teaching professional is there, the operation is not going to fall apart. And I think it really goes a long way for, we talk about well-being, the well-being of our staff as well, that, hey, you know what, I can have a Saturday off. I'm not going to have a random Tuesday off where my significant other's got to go to work. You know, I can actually go to the beach maybe, you know, go in the water, who knows. But it's one of those things where we've kind of gone in the forefront of that and given everyone on our staff a weekend off per month, and then also, if it's not a tournament weekend, having, you know, a member or two of the professional staff off for that day. And it's gone a long way just for recharging the batteries and getting the most out of our staff professionals.
Culture is so important too. That's a big thing for me, is just making sure that, you know, I'm taking care of the guy next to me, and then he's taking care of the guy next to him. And if there's a mutual respect level amongst all of your staff, and, you know, if there's a cancer in your staff too, and making sure that you know, reach out to that person and you're telling them how their attitude affects others, you know, having some of those hard conversations as a leader and as a manager, that stuff's not easy. But then taking them all out after the big member guest and making sure you buy them around and some dinner, and making sure that if I have to say no to a pro-am, oh, dude, Garrett, you're playing in this pro-am with this guy. Go play in this, and give the nod to those guys every now and again. Stupid example, but we have a staff basketball game every year. And we split up teams, and I made jerseys for everybody, and we go play basketball, and it's really hilarious watching golf pros play basketball. And then we all go back to my house for barbecue afterwards. And if you do little, like we all, fantasy football league, just amongst our staff, if you do little things like that, it comes back to you tenfold, because they know that, I'm sure I act like a robot sometimes around the club, and my staff's like, oh, I never get a chance to talk to Reed. Or I'm always walking the other way as they need me for something, because I'm always going to the next appointment. No, take a time out, talk to your staff, hang out with your staff. We treat them like family. They all have little families of their own. We get the families together from time to time. So that builds culture and has absolutely nothing to do with golf. And it's maybe the most important thing I do.
I think we've already started on the next question. What do you
Real
think?
quick, are there any videos of this basketball game?
I have pictures. I have pictures.
Andrew, what do you think the solution may be, and what can leaders at clubs do to make a difference?
Right. So, I think that's kind of why we're all here, right? And to Chris's presentation earlier as well, you often can't just throw money at the problem. It's too late. You need time. So, obviously, recruitment's an important part of this, and that's something PGA National has certainly taken a big step with and made a priority. But more so at the local level, we just kind of looked at it really several years down the road, that it really all kind of starts now. And so what we put together, and you've heard basically a lot of what it is already, but we're starting up the New Jersey PGA Wellbeing Initiative. And this isn't some complicated initiative. You'll see it. It's a one-pager, and there's 4 boxes, and you check all 4 boxes, right? And so one of the first objective, and that's really what we wanted to kind of emphasize today, and hopefully we got that across, but is the first step is really to schedule a meeting with club decision makers and the PGA professional at the facility. One, just to talk about some of these things, and really just kind of figure out how each club and facility in the section here can check these boxes, right? Objective 2, and we talked about it with scheduling. It's the standard has kind of been 6-7 day weeks. Now every club is different. Reed was talking about how he works bits of 7 days. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. It might be one weekend off a month for staff members. It could be a 5-day week. It could be a 5.5-day week, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's just having that conversation about how can we move in that direction away from, working every single day, right? Objective 3 is hosting staff appreciation events. You've heard about it with basketball, with different, one thing that we did, we talk about how everyone's motivated differently. I had a crew this last year that all they wanted to do was play golf. So we created basically a tournament, once a week, and we added a purse to it. So there's just, everyone's motivated so differently, so there's so many different ways to do that, but just so your staff feels appreciated and they have a chance to connect and, develop that culture. And then fourth is just, just promote it, right? Just, whether it's just an email to the membership that, hey, look, we're participating in this initiative. And there's a lot of things at a lot of clubs it's already being done already. And again, that's why we're here as well, just to raise awareness of this and the steps that we take today, in the spring as we plan for a great golf season, that's ultimately how, we'll attract, more talent at all of our clubs. We'll have more staff retention. And at the end of the day, what do we achieve? A better member experience, right? And that's why we're all here, really, to move golf forward and keep the momentum going. So,
Awesome.
I'll give you one little quick example,
Okay.
and it goes back to Chris's presentation again. He had talked about the one slide where a member brought in donuts and coffee at the beginning of a long day or something like that. We had a member reach out to me, post-member guest this past year, and he knew that we always went out to this one bar and grill in Chatham after the big member guest, and I get 20 people, and I used to put my credit card down and pay for the whole thing, And now I had members coming to me going, hey, are you going to the River Grill later today? Are you going to go celebrate like a big weekend? I said, yeah. He goes, send me the tab. I was like, wow, I was just floored by that gesture. And, you know, Canoe Brook prides itself on being the preeminent family club, you know, in the state and certainly in the area, right? And man, was that a great example of, you know, showcasing that philosophy back to a staff member. And every single staff member that was there that day, I made sure that they knew that, you know, this member or a specific group of members was taking care of the bill. And wow, just, we were so floored by the gesture. And now I have other members saying, I want to cover it this year. And so, like, you know, you get something like that, and you talk about that particular group of staff. Man, I can't wait to come back next year. What a powerful message that is.
Absolutely. Good way to end. Don, Reed, Jason, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Let's get a round of applause for these guys.
I think we realize one of the reasons why the state of golf in New Jersey is so good is when you see the 4 pros and all the pros, certainly everyone I know, and not just the how they serve and do their job, but the passion as well as the you know, just the giving back to the game. It's not just a job for these gentlemen and women and gentlemen, so thank you very much. It was a great day. There's a couple, everything will be available on our website. The video will be posted, so feel free to, I'm sure you can download it and send it on. They see some small gifts in the little boxes in front of you, so please take one. You know, again, I think what we covered today, you know, was tremendous and pertinent, and we're going to always continue to see how we can do this in a better, more, you know, better attended fashion too throughout the state. So we're going to, you know, focus on that for all the speakers and all the attendees. Thank you. We have a lot going on this year. Take a look at our tournament website, and obviously the head pros will be either participating or hosting, and everybody else either playing or please get a chance to go out or volunteering. Our next big event in terms of a public event, May 3rd, is our Hall of Fame. We'll be here. We have some great inductees. We've now had about, I want to say, 7 or 8 years of really a great program. So go to the website, sign up for that. So, and as Kevin noted, we have a couple of years, although before we know it, it's going to be here, so we don't want to wait too long to plan, but we have our 125th anniversary. So we're going to try to make sure we do something, and thank you, Rand, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more Rand in terms of guiding us. So thank you again, and we will see everybody on the golf course. Take care.